Hey guys, if you're not subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button on the video. And if you don't have time to watch this episode right now, no problem, but I'd really appreciate it if you would save it to your watch later playlist. Finally, if you'd like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below. Thank you.
So I said to Kerry, this is 2009, the Pakistanis arrested that doctor. They charged him with espionage.
This is before he's killed, because he's killed in 2011.
Correct.
Right, yeah.
So I said, we should get him out and bring him back to the United States.
Oh, because you knew that you were read in on the intelligence that they confirmed it was him. You knew about bin Laden's whereabouts 2 years before it happened and you weren't even in the CIA anymore?
Yeah.
How do you know? What about the other one, though? You know what one I'm going to ask about?
Which one?
The files. The ones that were just magically shut from everyone at the end of 2021, at the end of Ghislaine Maxwell's trial.
Oh, that.
The Epstein files.
You know, I almost forgot about that. Talk about literally no reason to be classified.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing. You know Epstein's Black Book?
Do I know? I've read it.
It's sold at auction. The original sold at auction. And the photocopy's out there for people to see. Yeah. Why would we be protecting a guy like him? Why? He's a convicted pedophile, first of all, and probably way worse than just that.
Yes.
I think the evidence is pretty strong that he was way worse than that.
He's a bad guy.
I say all the time, and I'm going to repeat it here. I think the reason why even in death he's being protected is I believe pretty strongly that he was a Mossad access agent.
As do I.
It all points to that.
So why are we protecting him?
Yeah, exactly. Why are we protecting him? Uh-huh.
That's why you're here. Please answer.
I mean, well, look at why the Mossad might be interested in somebody like him. Let's say you are the leader of the Mossad and you want really tightly held, closely protected information from senior American leaders, political leaders, business leaders. You can't recruit those people. You're not going to recruit Bill Clinton. You're not going to recruit Bill Gates or any of the other people, Prince Andrew. You're not going to recruit those people. So you do the next best thing. You recruit somebody who has ready access to that.
That's right.
And then on top of that, you give him an unlimited amount of money where he's got this private island in the Caribbean and a private jet where he can fly his friends down there. You wire the house for audio and video so nothing is overlooked. And you ply them with alcohol and underage girls. And you've got them. You've got them. So you can either do it the easy way or you can do it the hard way. You say to them, look, you just had a 16-year-old girl. And so you're going to tell me what I want to know. Or they know what the game is. They know what they've done. Otherwise, we wouldn't have people coming out and saying, well, I kept my underwear on. Remember that?
Uh-huh.
So I think that that's what this was. I think that this is because we all know that the Israelis spy on us. I mean, they're worse than the KGB or whatever the KGB calls.
Yeah, we're going to talk
today.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're for the intelligence community in the United States, Israel is ranked as critical threat for counterintelligence. They are prolific spies. And so it just makes perfect sense to me that this would be an access operation.
So again, though, why are we the ones saying nope, closed up? Because let me paint a picture for you real quick, and you tell me if I'm way off here. I don't care if I'm way off. It's just what I think about sometimes. And I remember my first conversation I ever had with Danny Jones on the phone. We talked about this, and I've had this thought for probably 4 or 5 years. I want you to imagine you're sitting in a back room in Israel in 1967 or 1968. Okay, you just had the whole 1967 thing pop off.
Right.
You were just over 20 years removed from the Holocaust, where your race was attempted to be exterminated from this earth.
Yep.
You are still 4 years out from the Munich Olympics, where people are going to put their hands up and not help you, or not let you even come in and help the situation when your people were kidnapped, and the games actually continued. They didn't even pause while it was going on.
That's right.
So that's not even on the table yet. But you realize that there's a lot of support around the world that isn't necessarily coming to your aid. In your defense, you are a small country in the middle of the Middle East where at the time, every single country around you would like you eradicated from the earth. And in this room is only a handful of people. It's like gold in my ear, the leader, maybe definitely the head of Mossad, maybe the head of Shin Bet, one or two other people. And you were sitting around, and mind you, in America, we think about everything tomorrow, the day after that. Maybe if we're a real long-term thinker, we're thinking about next year.
Good point.
Other places around the world, they think 200-300 years out. Certain places around the world, they're thinking thousands of years out. And when you have something like, the Jewish people who have been persecuted throughout time, stuck together very well, who just witnessed an extinction event happen, they are thinking thousands of years out to make this last. Their population have been decimated.
That's why the Hasidic Jews have so many children.
Yeah, sure.
It's to repopulate.
Another great example. So you have that thought in mind, and I say this because you're not thinking about what does Israel look like in 1987. You're thinking about what Israel looks like in 3027, and what your people, the diaspora, looks like around the world. And you say to yourself, it's now math. It's now a mathematical analytical trade-off. That's why you're in this job. You say to yourself, okay, how do we ensure our survival thousands of years from now? Well, we got one place that's a great friend, America. But they are geographically separated from us, and we're having some trouble getting them to come over here and help us on certain issues. We've had some tough back-channel communications with them. It's not really working as well as we want, and we know the people in Europe are good for nothing. So how do we make sure America is our best friend? Well, this is the dawn of the TV age. It's where pop culture kind of all comes together. It's post-Kennedy, who was a pop culture president. You have politics, you have entertainment, you have media, you have, business. All these things are interchangeable. And you say, okay, we need to make sure we get close to these people. And we need to make sure that when we get close to these people, we have some information that can make sure that they're there for us when we need them. And so they sit around the room and they say, all right, what's one thing people can't come back from? And someone raises their hand and they say murder. And they're like, no, that's been done before. People have come back from that. You can come back from that. And then someone in the room says, and you got to bleep this, Alessi, f the kid. And everyone in the room knows that this is a first world country we're talking about, and that's a big no-no. You don't come back from that. You do that, you're cooked.
It's not possible.
You're cooked. And they sit there and they say, maybe they don't say it like this, but they say, are we willing to sacrifice the lives, effectively, of 50,000 kids over the next 5-6 decades to make sure that our entire race survives 1,000 years from now? And in the words of Aldo Rain, I'll make that deal, right? Like, that's the attitude that the people in those rooms have. And that's not a deal I want to make, to be clear. I'm not saying about myself.
Right.
I'm saying this is how they might think.
I could see
Is that far-fetched?
No. I could see that. I could see that. Their calculation is far different than our calculation would be. You're right about long-term versus short-term. We only look to, the end of the current president's term. We don't do long-term planning. We never have. We pretend to, like on nuclear stockpiles and stuff like that, but we don't really do long-term planning. They do very long-term planning. And that's why they're such prolific spies. I remember on my first day at the CIA, and I think I told you this before, we were in it's called the Bubble, the CIA's auditorium, and all the new hires, there were like hundreds of us. And we were getting briefings, like the head of security would come and brief us, and the head of HR, and the head of this, and the head of that, and whatever. And the head of counterintelligence came to brief us and said, he explained what a declared officer was versus a unilateral officer. So a unilateral officer is you're undercover overseas, nobody knows you're CIA. A declared officer is somebody where, like, I was declared in Athens. My boss took me to the Greek intelligence service and said, this is John Kiriakou. He's a CIA officer, and he's here to work with your people. Okay, so they've declared my status. So he said that the Israelis have 2 declared officers here. One Mossad, one Shin Bet. They work in the Israeli embassy.
They're missing 187, though.
And the FBI had, the FBI had identified 189, 189 undeclared Israeli officers, intelligence officers, and they were mostly in defense contractors all across America trying to steal our defense secrets. Later on, somebody told me, well, the Israelis are obsessed with the idea that we're not giving them everything. right? And we give them pretty much everything, but they want to make sure they're getting everything, literally everything. For example, when the F-35 came out, they were the first ones to say, we want the F-35. And so we said, okay, we'll give you the F-35. So we just barely degraded the avionics. Okay. And we called it the F-35I for Israel. And the reason why we did that is because we don't want anybody to have exactly the avionics that we have in case, what happens if one of these crashes in Russian territory and the Russians reverse engineer it? Now they have the F-35. We did the same thing with the Emiratis, the F-35E for Emirates. So they said, no, we want your F-35, the same F-35 that you have. And we're like, no, we're not giving it to you. And we sold them the F-35I. Well, they're trying to steal the avionics for the F-35 because we wouldn't turn it over. It's very typical of what the Israelis do. And then, at the same time, they smile and they thank you. And our friendship is forever.
Our greatest ally.
Yeah, another one. He should have stayed in Philadelphia. The world would be a better place.
Yeah, he's not great.
No.
This is such a hard topic because people have such strong opinions. And I get yelled at by everyone on this.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like a lot of things, I'm pretty down the middle on this one.
Yeah,
I fully understand why it's a state. I support that. I would like a two-state solution.
Me too.
I think that Hamas and Hezbollah are bad. I also think the current leadership of the Israeli government is bad. I think what's going on in Gaza is terrible. I understand October 7th was terrible, and that's what started in the first place.
I agree with every word you've said.
Okay, so let's keep going here. First of all, the million-dollar question. Let's start with an easy one. The F-35I example. If the shoe were on the other foot, will we not do the same thing?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you got to call it both ways on this. That's fair. Second example. Not necessarily like a guy like Epstein himself, who was just so prolific and really he was over the top about it. Like, he was in your face about it.
Yes.
It was really disgusting and pathetic and a lot of things at the same time. The types of things he did, though, that involved trafficking, human trafficking, let's call it what it is. Do we ever do that too?
Not in my experience. I ask, when I speak at universities, as part of my standard speech, I ask this question. It's a hypothetical question. But I usually talk about ethics. And I say, imagine you are a CIA officer working overseas undercover, and you have recruited a bona fide terrorist. Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whatever. It doesn't make any difference. And you meet with him monthly in a hotel room, let's say in Amman or Cairo. And this guy has given you actionable intelligence that you have used to disrupt attacks against the United States. The guy's the real deal. And you go to meet him one day, and he says, you know what? I've given you everything that you have wanted. So today you're going to do something for me. And I'm not giving you any more information until you get me a prostitute right now.
Just a prostitute.
Do you get him the prostitute? I always ask, show of hands, how many people would give him the prostitute? And usually about 75% put their hands up.
Yeah, I'd probably make that deal.
Yeah. And I say, yeah, you would. You'd give him the prostitute. It's nasty. It's ugly. But, this is the job that we've chosen.
And that's her job, as long as she agreed to it, like on a business.
Yeah.
Okay.
What if he asks you for a prostitute?
Yeah, I knew it was going there.
Mm-hmm. How many would give him a prostitute?
That's where I can't do this.
They all look around. And then usually about 10% will put their hand up. And I say, absolutely not. Not under any circumstances.
Let's talk about peptides for a minute. If you're like me, you're seeing them everywhere. Just because something says peptide on the label doesn't mean it's actually doing anything for you. That's where OneSkin's OS01 peptide is different. While some peptides just sit on top of the skin, OS01 goes deeper. It's scientifically formulated to penetrate the cells within skin's deeper layers, improving key skin health markers like collagen production, hydration, and skin barrier function. Not only that, OS01 is proven to remain stable from the lab to your countertop
shop so you get reliable results every time. Listen, if you're not getting results from your peptide, it might be time to take a closer look. All of OneSkin's topical supplements are backed by lab and clinical studies, and they're all powered by the OS01 peptide, the first and only peptide scientifically proven to target the senescent cells that contribute to lines, wrinkles, and thinning skin. Try OneSkin to get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase using code Julian at oneskin.co. Now, my favorite product at OneSkin is by far the OS01 face topical supplement. I use this in the mornings and always at night. And it also smells really good, by the way. You put it on your skin, you get a good little feeling. But what this does is it helps reduce the lines on my face, and I've been using it now for, I don't know, maybe like 6 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that, and I do see a difference. Obviously, I gotta look good on camera, so you know, we need stuff like this. So go get 15% off your first order of OneSkin products by using code Julian at oneskin.co. That link is in the description below. Once again, that's 15% off using code Julian at oneskin.co. After your purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them, so please support our show and tell them Julian sent you. Invest in the health and longevity of your skin with OneSkin. Your future self will thank you.
First of all, from a practical perspective, he's not going to walk away. You're paying him thousands and thousands of dollars for his information. You're probably willing to resettle him if something goes wrong. But this is a child we're talking about. A child. The problem, though, is, and this is why I bring this up, there's no rule at the agency. Remember, your job is to break the laws of the country that you're in. You're committing espionage just having the meeting in the first place. So you've got to go into a career like this with your own set of moral values, with your own ethical standards. Deep down, we all know right from wrong. It's really not that complicated. You know that it would be wrong to do something like that under any circumstances. And sometimes people will say, well, greater good and all that stuff. And I say, no. In real life, he's going to give you the information. It's not about the child. He can go out and do whatever he wants in his own time. But you've got to draw the line between right and wrong because headquarters isn't going to do it for you.
I think the incentive structure you point out in that example actually makes your answer make sense. I would believe that. But on a greater mission level, meaning like if it wasn't just some guy who you're already paying who says, you know what, go get me a kid. And you're like, fuck you, you're not going anywhere, right? If it was something where you were trying to infiltrate people who were involved with this kind of thing and you needed to not even create it yourself.
You mean to disrupt a network?
Sure. That a network that doesn't have to do with that, but they do this too. You're telling me, and I hope you're right too, because I would like to think we don't do this, but you're telling me that that would never happen?
You know, I can't say with 100% certainty, but I can say in the 15 years that I was there, I never encountered anything even close.
Yeah, I couldn't see you doing that. Never. Yeah, you wouldn't even do the torture.
No, I wouldn't even do the torture. One guy asked me for a ton of money, and I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of money. And he says, well, I brought all my wife's gold jewelry. I said, what am I, a jeweler now?
Yeah.
Come on, you know the deal. You signed a contract.
It's a big organization though, and we don't know how big it is. And I always ask
there
that to be fair.
There are a lot of sociopaths walking the halls.
And you know that, we're zeroing in on Epstein here because he was caught and he was here.
Yeah.
They're not the only ones who do that, man.
You're absolutely right.
There's a lot of agencies that do that kind of thing around the world.
A lot.
And that's where it gets messy. It's disgusting. It's horrible. But, the fact that we are closing those files does tell me a lot, and it tells me that there's influence bought. You know,
there has to be, because again, there is literally no reason, no legitimate reason for any of those documents to be classified. None.
Yeah. Another argument that pisses me off with this, because I think people are looking at it the wrong way, is the whole AIPAC thing. So everyone complains about AIPAC, and they blame AIPAC,
right?
And they blame Israel,
right? And
I'm like, wait a minute.
Blame the Justice Department and the Congress.
Right. They're using the system
Sure.
that we allow to be used. Of course they're looking out for their own country's interests.
It's like blaming rich people for taking tax deductions.
That's what I'm saying.
Don't blame the rich people.
Fix the law.
Exactly.
Why don't we do that? Why is that not changed? Because, I mean, I'm going to be straight with you. When I look at Trump's current cabinet, there's three positions, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, that have the most impact on foreign policy outside of Tulsi Gabbard, okay, at DNI, and Ratcliffe at CIA. There's the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and the UN ambassador, and we're one of like 2 countries that can veto anything there.
Yes.
I got a UN ambassador, Stefanik, whose #1 funder is AIPAC, who goes in front of fucking the Senate to get confirmed and tells Van Hollen did a great job with her. He didn't try to bury her. He knew his shit, and she told him to his face that she believes that Israel has a biblical right to the West Bank, which is a war crime for everyone.
It's a war crime
for everyone keeping track out there. I then have a Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who's funded out by them. And then I have a Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who, not his fault. He just came from Fox News, so we can't see where he's funding. But when he's walking out of meetings with, John Fetterman, a senator who's going to vote on him, what's the first thing he says? I was very glad I could sit down for the position of United States Secretary of Defense with a United States Senator and discuss our greatest ally, Israel, and our unwavering support to them. If my United States Senator and my United States Secretary of Defense #1 issue for the United States Defense Department is another country, they could be the best country in the world. It could be my best friend in Britain.
What about?
And I don't with that.
What about the congressman that wore an Israeli military uniform onto the floor of the House?
Oh yeah, you're talking. What's the guy with he's missing his legs? I don't mean that in a mean way. What the hell's his name? Brian. He was on that article we pulled up earlier. He's the guy who announced all these things, all the U.S. aid funding. Brian, right? Man or
it's short. Not man. It's.
You have the link, Alas?
Mars.
The one I texted you. Yeah, that guy.
What was it?
Brian Mast.
Yeah, Mast.
He was wearing another country. Again, I don't have any issue. There's a lot of positive about Israel. But, if that were a British uniform, everyone would be up in arms.
Yeah, they would be. Yeah.
What the
Yes. It's unacceptable. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I feel exactly the same way. And, it pains me, too, that we are so willing as a country to just acquiesce to genocide. And even the act of moving Palestinians out of Gaza to develop the land, that is an act of genocide.
Ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, it's ethnic cleansing. Exactly. Why is nobody talking about this? You can't do it. I was talking to an Albanian documentary filmmaker just a couple of days ago. And he said, there's this idea being floated that they're going to move all the Palestinians to Albania because we're Muslim. And I'm like, Albania? I hadn't heard that. He said the Albanians are up in arms right now.
Secular Muslims, too.
Yeah, they're secular Muslims.
Yeah.
Who don't speak Arabic, by the way.
Yeah.
And, there was talk early on, it came from the White House, of moving them to this island that's owned by Indonesia, and they could speak Arabic there. And then the third idea was to split them in half, and you put half in Jordan and half in Egypt, and both the Jordanians and Egyptians said, absolutely not. In 68, in September of 68, Palestinians were fighting Jordanian troops literally on the steps of the royal palace to take Jordan for themselves. Fully half of the population of Jordan is Palestinian.
The king's wife is Palestinian.
The king's wife is Palestinian.
Now, what do you think of that guy? Let's start there.
I like the king.
I do too. He's my favorite king.
He's my favorite king too.
I know we fought a war over that here. I don't really fuck with kings and queens, but he's a gangster.
When I was living in London, I used to see the Greek king, the exiled, deposed Greek king, in church on Sunday. The royal family gets the first row in the church. Yeah. And I used to think, you sorry bastards, you're not even Greek. You're Danish. You were imposed on us.
That's right.
They speak German. King Otto I, Orthonos, which isn't even a Greek name, they Hellenized it. He was king for 30 years. He never learned how to speak Greek. Get the fuck out of here and let us have our democracy.
Fucking Prince Philip, his dad was in charge of Greece. Yeah.
Prince Philip was born in Greece.
I'm Greeker than he is.
Yeah, exactly. He was born in Corfu.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I'm happy you bring that up is because I've been monitoring this one like crazy since the beginning because that Jordanian king, I first got introduced to him through Joby Warrick's books, and I was blown away by him.
He's a very sweet guy.
One of the things, and now I know like several people who are like friends with him from different walks of life.
You know, he's got a beautiful house
in D.C.
Yeah, he's got two actually. He's got one in Potomac, Maryland.
Of course he does.
That was his dad's, and then he's got a magnificent condo in the what is it, not the Waldorf Astoria,
in New York?
Four Seasons? No, in
DC.
Georgetown.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm less familiar.
Yeah.
But, you know, the thing that blew me away with Joby is that Joby's first book was about al-Belawi, the guy who blew up the base, the CIA base, who was a Jordanian doctor.
I think I'm in that book.
You probably are.
Yeah.
Wait, do you remember the context you might have been?
Yeah, I sat next to Jennifer Matthews.
The woman who died?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were branch chiefs together. Oh yeah. I knew her very well. She was the chief of, I forget what she was the chief of, and I was the chief of counterintelligence in Alex Station. So we sat next to each other.
Oh shit!
Mm-hmm.
You were the chief of Did you tell me this before?
I don't know. I don't remember.
You were the chief of counterintelligence on the Bin Laden desk.
Yeah.
For how long?
Oh, not long. From when I got back from the Abu Zubaydah operation to when I went up to the 7th floor as the executive assistant.
Okay, so this is after 9/11.
After 9/11.
All right, I think we did talk about this. Well, but let's take a little side trip, though. We'll come back to the king. What was that like at that point? Because he's in the weeds. He's in the wind, I should say.
Yeah, he was in the wind. So my job was to counter Al-Qaeda efforts to infiltrate the CIA.
Al-Qaeda was infiltrated.
Yeah.
Did they ever successfully do it?
No. But
that's good.
The closest they ever came was, unfortunately, the Khost bombing, where she was killed.
Right. So source infiltration.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. All right.
You know, may I finish a couple thoughts on
Yes.
Jennifer? And I told Joby this when he was writing the book. Many of us were furious with the CIA, not with Jennifer. Jennifer fucked up, but it was not her fault. The CIA's got this rule, stupid rule, that in order to be promoted to the senior intelligence service, you have to have done a rotation in the policy community and a rotation in another directorate. So, like for me, I started in the DI, I went to the DO. And then I did a rotation to the State Department, where I was in the American Embassy in Bahrain for 2 years, and then I was the Iraq desk officer at State. Legitimate State Department jobs. So that made me eligible to be promoted to the Senior Intelligence Service. She had done a rotation at State, but she had never done a rotation in Ops. Well, post 9/11, everybody's like a chicken without a head, right? So if you're an analyst, a career analyst, she'd been in for 12, 15 years by then. You're an analyst and they want to move you into an operational position. You've got to go through something called the Operations Course Accelerated, OCA. So you skip all the CIA 101 silliness. This is what a cable is. This is what an operation is. This is, you already know all that stuff, so you just skip it. So instead of an 18-month class, yours is 6 months. And they teach you how to shoot and how to do the crazy driving and how to build a bomb and how to take a bomb apart and how to do all these different things in those 6 weeks. And then you go out to the field. So all of this, the weapons, the counter surveillance, all this stuff is fresh in your mind. But with Jennifer, they're like, oh my God, we need somebody to go to Khost, like right now. Hey, Jennifer, you need a rotation of the DO, right? So you can get promoted? Okay, go to Khost. Can you go tomorrow? And they send her. She didn't know what the fuck she was doing. She didn't have any experience at all in operations. 0 experience in operations. She was brilliant and a great analyst, but they didn't train her to protect herself. And the next thing you know, we get this volunteer, and he's Bin Laden's doctor. And oh my God, it's amazing.
Al-Belawi.
Yeah, Belawi. And so this is going to be the greatest source we've ever had against Al-Qaeda. And it just fell into our lap because he just volunteered. And let's bring him onto the compound. And then they learn, well, it's his birthday, right? So we're going to bake him a cake. We're going to bake him a cake and sing happy birthday. Oh, you know what would be a better idea? Let's meet him outside the hard line. Let's meet him where we can't be protected, because that'll show him how much we like him and how grateful we are for his information. And we'll give him the cake. So everybody leave your posts and let's all go out to the car. Now, as crazy as this is so far, he gets out of the car and he's muttering to himself, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, maliki yawmiddin. And that wasn't alerting to anybody?
What does that mean again?
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, there is only one God, and he is God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not what you want to hear when they're standing there with a fucking birthday cake.
No.
And then he blows everybody up.
Yeah.
It was the worst. It was the worst deadly attack in CIA history. We lost more people that day than in any other day in the history of the CIA.
This is like, what, like 07?
Mm-hmm.
So you were out.
I was out. I was at ABC News then doing counterterrorism commentary.
Got it.
Mm.
That's where your timeline picks up. But so you were with her, though, on that desk for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was that desk like?
Busy.
Yeah.
Oh
What kind of leads were you getting on them? Because no one knew at that time.
No, most of what we were getting was shit. You know, you get, when I was in Pakistan, I used to get these people all the time, walk-ins.
Yep.
So a walk-in is somebody who literally walks in off the street and says, I have intelligence that I want to share with the CIA. Okay. 98% of the time, it's a lunatic, right? 1% of the time, it's either what's called an intelligence peddler, which is somebody who actually has a nugget of interesting information. And he brings it to you, and you give him $100. But then he goes to the British embassy, and then the French embassy, and then the Russian embassy, and then that's a month's salary.
You got to make a living.
Yeah. Yeah, legit.
Yeah.
The other 0.5% is what's called a probe. So this is usually Iranian. It can be Hezbollah or North Korean. And they'll come into the embassy like this. They'll be like, yeah, I have information I want to give to the CIA. Can you call a CIA guy down here for me? And they're looking like, where are the cameras? Are the doors armored? Are the windows armored? How many of the people I'm dealing with have guns? Can I see the true name of anybody on their badge, or have they obscured their badge? How many checkpoints do I have to get through before I'm actually inside? So in the event that they want to attack our embassy at some point and blow it up, they've got a design on how to do that. That's why we keep them outside the hard line. Only in the smallest embassies do you bring them in. But otherwise, you know, I'll meet you at that shack in the parking lot because you're not coming in here.
Yeah.
But then the remaining 1% is the real deal. And the old timers who worked against the Soviets will tell you that the greatest sources in the history of the CIA started as walk-ins, because they're so deep down into the weeds that you would never encounter them. You're not going to meet those people at some diplomatic cocktail party, right? You're not going to meet them anywhere officially. Like, are you going to meet a North Korean nuclear scientist at a cocktail party? Of course you're not. But he may just walk up to the embassy and knock on the door. That's a career-making recruitment. And so when they saw Balawi and he's, you know, pretending to be, well, I'm not sure I want to do this. Well, but maybe I should because 3,000 Americans were killed. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. He played it just right.
Yeah.
And they were so excited because this was the first major source that we had, akin to what we once had against the Soviets. This is going to make, people are going to get medals. They're going to get promoted. You know, this is going to be incredible.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
Where did you guys, when you were on the desk, 04, whatever, somewhere in there, where did you guys think he was? Where was your inkling?
Bin Laden?
Yep.
It was pretty well split. I thought he was in Afghanistan. And
why?
I just didn't think he had the wherewithal to get out from Tora Bora. I thought that he was hunkered down in a cave. I really did. And then, you know, later on somebody said, oh, he's probably still in that cave. And I said, no, that doesn't make sense. We know that he's got kidney problems. And it's cold in caves. You can be in a cave, okay, overnight, but not years in a cave. I said, he's probably in some little village somewhere in some, mud hut. And then the other half believed, nah, he's probably in Pakistan. He's probably like right on the border somewhere. We didn't realize he had gotten so far in. And he's staying at, what was effectively the west point of Pakistan.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
Right on top of it.
Abbottabad.
That's nuts that you won that desk.
Can I go back to John Kerry?
You can
for
do
one
whatever you
minute?
want,
'Cause
John.
You've just reminded me of something, or I've reminded myself of something. Abbottabad.
He asked me like I'm going to say no, fuck you.
One of the things I told Kerry early on, he told me, hey, we need to come up with some investigations. This is when I thought he actually meant it before I learned better.
Yeah.
And I said, are you planning any international travel? And he said, yeah, I want to go to Pakistan and Afghanistan. I said, okay, I'll go with you to Pakistan and Afghanistan. But I think what we should do is the doctor that led us to bin Laden. Do you remember the story of the doctor? We recruited a Pakistani doctor to go to Abbottabad. Let me back up.
Yeah.
So we've got drones, and the drones are flying over Abbottabad. We had a source who said, hey, there's a guy in Abbottabad, and he's really tall, and he just walks in circles in the backyard. Never leaves. Just walks in circles in the backyard. So maybe it's bin Laden. And we said, yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But another thing that's interesting about this house that he's in is most of the houses have 8-foot tall walls around them because you don't want anybody to see your women, right?
Right.
You put walls around your house.
Yeah, you got to keep them protected.
But this wall around this house is 20 feet. It's not 8 feet. So, and this tall guy in white just walking in circles. Never
Fucking
leaves the house.
Anunnaki. Someone's in there.
Right? This is somebody, whoever it is. If it's not bin Laden, it's somebody. So what we did is we recruited a doctor, and a Pakistani doctor. And we said, we want you to go to Abbottabad, go to this neighborhood and give free polio vaccines. But as you're giving the polio vaccine, take a little DNA test. Now,
somewhere RFK is going, this is how they get you. They come up with the polio vaccine, and then you're fucked. That's how we got bin Laden.
So, excuse me. The bin Laden family was deeply ashamed of what Osama had done. So they offered us their help. And we said, well, what would be nice would be a DNA sample. So in case we kill him and we blast him to 1 million pieces, we can pick up a piece of meat and run a DNA test and we confirm that it's him.
That was a nice flex you just did, by the way. That was why I laughed. He showed me something. But go ahead.
I thought you'd get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I love how you just don't stop the story. Just keep going. He'll laugh.
So, so we had the DNA profile of the bin Laden family in general. So we recruit this doctor. He goes in the neighborhood. Hey, playing the music. No, there's no music. Like a ice cream truck.
I would have gone with it.
Free polio vaccines for everybody. And these women bring the children out, and he gives the polio vaccine, and he takes a little DNA. We run the sample. Bin Laden family. So they had called him the walking man all this time. And it was then that they were able to confirm it was him. So Obama sends in the stealth helicopters. They kill him. They take the body. They take the wives. The rest is history. So I said to Kerry, this is 2009, the Pakistanis arrested that doctor. They charged him with espionage.
This is before he's killed, because he's killed in 2011.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
So I said, we should get him out and bring him back to the United States.
Oh, because you knew that you were read in on the intelligence that they confirmed it was him.
Mm-hmm.
You knew about bin Laden's whereabouts 2 years before it happened, and you weren't even in CIA anymore?
Yeah. People talk.
Yeah, how do you know?
People talk.
Holy shit.
They get excited and they can't keep it to themselves.
Yeah, I'm going to tie you down later and fucking get all the secrets out of you.
I've been out 20 years now.
Pause.
So I said to Kerry, we should get this guy out. I said, you'll be a national hero if you can get this guy out. And the Pakistanis loved Kerry. So he's like,
that's not reassuring.
no. And he's like, nah.
Unless he just starts cracking.
He's like, I don't want to interfere in the, the internal relations, the internal politics of it. I said, Senator, there's no downside to this. There's no downside. This guy risked his life to give us Osama bin Laden. Let's just do him a solid. Bring him back. Wouldn't do it. Just wouldn't do it. And
did he give you a reason?
He
like a legit
didn't want to get involved. And now he may have had the idea on his own and raised it with Obama, and Obama said "fuck you," or he said something to whoever was CIA director at the time. I don't even. It was
Hayden. 09 would have been Hayden.
It was right after Hayden. So
Morrell.
Morrell was acting. No, it was what's his face from California, the congressman, Leon Panetta. Yeah, it was Leon Panetta, because then Panetta went on to be Secretary of Defense.
He was in charge when the Bin Laden thing happened.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So maybe there was some component here that I didn't know, that he had. I already had the idea. I said to Obama, and Obama said no, and Panetta said no. I have no idea, but I thought we should help this guy out because he risked his life for us. And Kerry's just like, not interested.
Did we ever get that guy out?
Mm-mm.
So he's still getting his balls electrocuted today?
Mm-hmm.
That's terrible.
Yep, he sure is.
Wow.
Yes, he is.
All right, so we were talking about El-Beloui with this, though.
Yes.
Because this is wild. What a great rabbit hole. So you knew all the players involved here, what was going on. So you already laid it out. He went on. If you saw the movie Zero Dark 30, this scene was shown.
I'm still angry about that stupid movie.
Why?
Because
another rabbit hole. Here we go.
It perpetuated the lie that it was the torture program that led to bin Laden's location.
Yeah.
That was a lie. Great analysis led to bin Laden's location.
They kind of showed both.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
They included that as...
Torture had nothing whatsoever to do with his location. Nothing. They recruited the right people. They used the right technology. And they found him.
Yeah. You and I talked about this a lot last time we were here, so people could check out 249, 250, where we went through that, so we won't go through that again. But either way, that scene was shown in that movie, and from what I understand, maybe you can give your input here, it was pretty accurate, that one.
It was generally accurate minus the torture part.
No, I mean the scene. The actual scene.
The scene was 100%.
Yeah.
In fact, I talked to, who did I talk to? Business Insider Magazine a couple of weeks ago. They had me review like eight intelligence-related movies.
Oh, you did one of those?
Yeah, it was so much fun. I can't wait to do it again. But one of them was that scene.
Yeah.
And it was right on.
Wow.
Right on. The only sad part is that 3 different Navy SEALs claim that they were the ones that did the kill shot.
Yeah, I'm not going to get involved with that.
Yeah.
You can go online and look. There's some interesting conversations in the Navy SEAL community around that.
One of them has made a living off of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, yeah. Yeah, I don't like getting involved in the military drama because I don't know shit about fuck.
Yeah.
That's theirs to do.
Yep,
but there are certainly, I think that there's one guy we're going to have in here who I want to talk to about it off camera because he's had some things to say. I don't want to personally get involved, but... Yeah, I kind of wonder why that's not a louder story, that there's multiple, like it's talked about. But there's one guy who it's like, oh yeah, that's who did it. Yeah. And then there's a lot of other people who are like, no, the fuck he didn't.
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
There's an auction house on Maryland's Eastern Shore, Alexander Auctions. They specialize in military auctions. And 75% of what they auction is Nazi, right? They even had an auction a couple weeks ago. They had Eva Braun's nightgown.
Did you go buy it?
Like no, it was like $50,000.
John's like, I wanted to.
I've bid on a couple things, but you can't believe the stuff that they have that's been signed, like random stuff that's been signed by this Navy SEAL who claims that he's the guy, the one who's made a living from it. Like there's a soccer ball signed by the guy. I don't want to say his name.
And maybe he was.
Maybe he was, but is it really worth $500 for an autographed, Time magazine with Bin Laden on it that this Navy SEAL signed?
I just don't understand because one thing about the veteran community is, goddamn, are they strong with the stolen valor stuff?
Oh,
like they
boy,
eat each other.
are they.
We've seen it in here. with some stuff where they got it wrong.
Yes.
And, ran with stuff. But,
Right.
You would think that would be, if that's the case, the biggest stolen valor
Ever.
in modern history.
Ever. Yeah.
And you would think there'd be a lot louder pushback. That's why I'm kind of like, maybe he probably did kill the guy, regardless of what you think about him, because it's not loud. There's some arguments, but it's not like people every day like this didn't happen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's crap.
I don't know. I don't know what the truth is.
I'm out. I don't want anything to do with it.
It
You
is
guys
one
figure
of
it
the
out
most
yourselves.
one of the most incredible and compelling and exciting scenes that a person can imagine.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know who did
Imagine
what.
you put 3 in the head of Bin Laden.
Can you
Oh,
imagine?
that'd be fucking awesome.
I would think about it for the rest of my life.
I know. I wouldn't have any. I mean,
Yeah, like what? How do you top that in a career?
you don't.
No,
You
can't.
don't. I don't think anything's ever the same after that.
No way.
But so the scene of El Beloui, accurate. You told Business
Yes.
Insider too.
Yes.
Right, cool. That.
Let me add one thing about Job. Joby's book is the most comprehensive account
Yeah.
of what happened that is humanly possible.
Yep.
He talked to everybody. And the way he lays it out is very compelling and completely true.
So you actually took the words out of my mouth, because that's exactly what I'm going to refer to. His book that was published in 2009
Yes.
covered that scene specifically and what led up to it.
Yes.
And so when he wrote this book, the guy was a Jordanian.
Mm-hmm.
This was a very bad look for Jordan.
Oh, boy. In fact, they apologized to us.
Yes.
Mhm.
And Joby wrote the book like he does, fairly, just reporting. He's a great storyteller, but Joby's not the guy who says, fuck you.
No,
or
no, no,
nothing
no,
like
no,
that.
no. Just the facts.
So he writes this book, and 2 things happen. Number 1, El Beloui's father, who did not feel the way El Beloui did and was embarrassed of
Wow.
what happened, put the book on his mantle because he said it was written fairly
Wow.
or whatever.
That's incredible.
The second thing that happened, obviously this whole thing's a very bad look for the king, and it was not written nicely to the king. It's reporting things that are not good for the Mukabarid, and obviously the things that slip through the cracks here. The king hit up Joby and said, hey, you could have been an asshole about this. You could have injected a lot of opinions in there. This is a really bad look for me, but you did this the honest way. It is a bad look for our country. We fucked up this or that. I appreciate the fact that, you did it in a professional way. So if you are ever writing a story in the future and you need some help getting sources, you call me and I will do that for you, which then ended up being the book on ISIS, which won him the Pulitzer.
Oh, my God.
And once again, the first chapter, really bad look for the king. And the guy is still friends with Joby and everything, which tells me he respects in some way the relationship of, what's supposed to be like the fourth estate of life.
Yeah.
Right? And so I have followed the guy religiously since I read that book years ago. And I just found him so interesting. So, he speaks perfect English.
Perfect.
He's Western
His
trained.
English is as good as ours.
He's this brilliant guy. He also, I like this about him, never wanted to be king, never thought he was going to be.
No, it was supposed to be his uncle.
Yeah, and then it was supposed to be his older brother.
Mm-hmm.
And his father's on his deathbed and says, no, fam, you're doing it.
Switched it up.
And he was like, what the fuck? And then his dad died. That's that.
Yeah, it was shocking.
So the guy, he's been king now for 25 years or whatever. First of all, every major event, he has been the Nostradamus on. He play-by-played how Iraq was going to happen when he was talking with the U.S. in 01 and 02.
Smart.
Right? Like, he gets so much. I'm sure he's got some shit wrong in there, but, he gets a lot right. And he understands the Middle East so well. And so right when October 7th happened, I was turning right to him. Like, all right, what's this motherfucker going to say about this? His wife's Palestinian,
Yeah.
so he's got a little feeling there.
She's stunning, isn't she?
She is. Queen Reina, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. So he was at some conference or something. This is like 2 weeks after October 7th, and he gives these long comments on this. And one of the questions that he was asked, and we actually had a clip go viral where I was explaining this last year, and a lot of people didn't know this. But one of the questions that he was asked was, will you commit to taking in Palestinian refugees?
Right.
And he said, I'm glad you asked that. No, I will not.
No.
Or I think they
No.
said to him, why have you said you won't do that? I think it was like a leading question because he had said he won't do that. He said, if I do that, because he has an allyship with Israel, but that doesn't mean just someone might not like our president at a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the same with him.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically said, if I did that, I would be giving the worst parts of Israel's government, the guys I don't like, exactly what they want.
That's a great answer.
The Smotriches, the
Yes.
Ben-Gavirs, and all that,
That's
because
right.
they believe in this expansion. And I would be ethnically cleansing these people from that plot of land, and they'd never be able to go back. And now, like, I was telling people about this, and I felt like this was one topic on this issue people weren't talking about a lot. And now
Yes.
it's being talked about all the time, because now you're seeing it play out. And there was, like, you know, Netanyahu, two things happened. Netanyahu, this is what I want you to respond to. Netanyahu comes in, meets with Trump. Trump actually did something I didn't expect, which we'll see how this turns out. It looks like, if you watch the press conference where they did publicly, Trump shocked Netanyahu. He hadn't told him this, and said the U.S. is going to handle it.
It's a
not
very
them.
Trump thing to do.
I kind of like that. It's like a halfway, or it's like, I still don't like this, but it's better. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
Okay.
Even Putin said that he preferred Trump to Biden because Trump was so unpredictable. You never knew when he was going to do something or propose something that was really great. And you knew not to expect anything great from Biden.
But Netanyahu hated that when he heard that, because he wanted it.
Yeah.
So maybe this will be a situation, because I haven't liked the way Trump's talked about it after, but maybe it's a situation where the people who live there will actually end up getting to stay there, which leads to my second point that I don't know if you saw this, but he then had the Jordanian king in. They had a very interesting 19.5-minute public press conference together. Jordanian king's a real master at handling it.
He is. He's a master diplomat.
So he commits in that to take in 2,000 kids who have cancer and stuff like that, which I think that's great. Trump liked that. And Trump was kind of dancing around the whole, well, are we going to settle him permanently in Jordan or have discussions about that? And the king was able to kind of stay away from the melee. The media kind of kept him out of that. But do you think he will be forced to relent on something like that?
No. That is a red line for the Jordanians that, if crossed, could actually eventually lead to the collapse of the Jordanian government. Like I said, there are already so many Palestinians in Jordan that do not have the full rights of citizenship.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, they even have different colored passports. Jordanians have green passports, and Palestinians in Jordan have black passports. So you can tell when they're Palestinian. And they're second-class citizens there. Now, they know after 70 years, they're not going to get their country back. They're not going to, there's no right of return that the Israelis are going to finally agree to. They're stuck in Jordan, and they're pissed off for 4 or 5 generations now. And so to make that worse, Jordanian's a country that has no money. It's one of the largest recipients of U.S. aid, but people still live in poverty there for the most part. To heap on the problems that Jordan already has, where they've got Israel and the Palestinians on one border, they've got Iraq on another border, they have Syria on another border. This is a very dangerous neighborhood, right? They have enough problems as it is. They can't take another million Palestinians. It's too much. It'll tip the balance.
What if the United States leans on them to end up doing that, though? How do you even say no?
I think they would have to say no, because you know how the Israelis always say, that it's either victory or be pushed into the sea, right? It's kind of the same thing for the Jordanians on this. I think I may have told you a story. A very dear friend of mine, my first boss at the CIA, he became the senior director for the Middle East at the National Security Council under Clinton. And the very last week of the Clinton presidency, he and Al Gore were at Camp David with Yasser Arafat and his people, and whoever the Israeli prime minister was, I forget now, and his people, whether it was Rabin. No, Rabin was dead by then.
Yeah, he was dead.
Shimon Peres, probably.
Well, it would have been Netanyahu.
No,
after Rabin.
Not in 2000, January of 2000.
No, that would have been Epstein's buddy. The hell's his name?
It had to be Shimon Peres, right?
No. What's the guy's? Can we Google Epstein prime minister friend? Why the fuck? He was in that movie. He showed up in the one scene where they hit people because he used to be a special force. Yeah, Ehud Barak.
Was it Ehud Barak?
Yeah.
I guess it was.
Yeah, he succeeded
in
Netanyahu.
2000.
Yeah.
Okay. So he said there's this enormous map of Jerusalem on this conference room table. He said they're so close to peace. They're literally dividing Jerusalem block by block with a Sharpie. And they finish. And they come to an agreement. And Al Gore says, my God, we have peace. And Arafat says, I can never sell this to the Palestinian people. And he starts to walk out.
Yeah.
And Gore runs out after him. And he said, you can't just walk out. If there's something that you're having second thoughts on, tell us. We'll renegotiate it. We can't come this close to peace and just let it fall apart. And he said, I could never sell any agreement with the Israelis to the Palestinian people. And that was the end of it.
This is where I always defend Israel with this stuff. These are the realities they do face. These people will be like, you're
right.
nowhere.
You're right. And what we're talking about here is a legitimate and viable two-state solution.
Yes.
And it was the Palestinians that walked
That's
away.
right. And that has happened again and again. And now listen, if there are a lot of Palestinians who live there who may not have voted for that leadership or were pressured into voting for that leadership, I have tremendous empathy for that. I know that's a real thing.
Totally agree.
But the people who have been given the power or taken the power to be in charge, whether it be Arafat and the PLO or, what we've seen in Gaza with fucking Hamas.
Yeah.
These are not good representatives.
No, you've got Mahmoud Abbas, who's 16 years into a 4-year term as president. And you've got a bona fide terrorist group in Gaza. So, I mean, what do you do now? Like the Israelis, I went to Israel twice in 2022 for work, both times. It was, I had never been to Israel before. Never. Been to 72 countries with the agency. I had never been to Israel. So I went as a journalist. An incredible, absolutely incredible, transformative place.
Beautiful place. I've been.
It's the best and the worst of what the Middle East has to offer.
It's a good way to put it.
And I was just struck by it. And I went for the election. The Israelis are adamant about the death of the two-state solution, right? There will not be a two-state solution. Well, there is already the one-state solution, and that's not working out very well, is it? Right? And I was talking to a former ambassador just the other day, and he said, why aren't we talking about the three-state solution? He said, the Gaza Palestinians and the West Bank Palestinians have literally nothing in common.
Yeah, they're literally geographically separated.
Yeah, they're geographically separated. Yeah. They're even kind of ethnically separated. Right? The Gaza Palestinians have more in common with the Egyptians than they do with the West Bank.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know that.
And they don't really like each other. And politically, they're at odds.
Yeah.
So he said, I think we should be having a conversation about a three-state solution. And I think he said that a three-state solution would look more like Bosnia-Herzegovina, where you look at the map and it's all these little dots, these little islands. Like here's Bosnia, but all these little dots either belong to Serbia or Croatia. It's like a map made of Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
But it works.
It works.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not, this is the whole, here's where I'll push back on that. This is the holiest land in the world.
See, that's the problem.
People get weird about it. And it's like, this is where I see it from Israel's perspective for sure. It's my friend Eric Zuliger has a great quote. I say it all the time. He said, people are not their governments. Mm-hmm. I would never want to be fucking co-signed to Dick Cheney and George Bush and what they did.
Way.
Right? And I understand why other people might take the easy way out around the world and do that at that time, when they were around. But you have a lot of Israeli people who don't support their current government, and even people that may have voted for that because it was the least of what they viewed as two evils. They're not bad people at all.
Right.
So I'm thinking about Israel after that government, when there's a more moderate government or something more reasonable.
Yeah, the most that Benjamin Netanyahu has ever won has been like 27%.
I didn't even know that.
They have so many political parties in that country that they have these governments that are made up of, a half a dozen or more different parties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my issue there would be, even though the two places don't see eye to eye, I did know that. I didn't know they were like ethnically different. I got to look into that more. But I know the two areas don't see eye to eye. You have PLO and Hamas, and very separate cultures. Now you have two places that are on your borders who got a lot of people who don't fucking like you. And it's going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. In fact,
And that's the Israeli argument.
But that's the thing. They have a good argument here. When you look at Gaza, I almost, from not now, but back then, I actually see it the way Netanyahu saw it in 2003. And bear with me here. He left the finance ministry. He was the finance minister. He was actually a very successful one. He was good at that job in protest over giving Gaza up. And he told them, he warned them for, the 2 years leading up to it, if you do this, I will leave. And he left. And, he was an OG on this because he said, all right, you're going to have a border with people who fucking hate you. Imagine if instead of Mexico, we had Iraq as our border in 2006. We'd have the biggest, most beautiful border wall you've ever seen in your fucking life.
Oh, yes.
Okay? But you created a 20-mile, by accident, prison because north border, Israel. East border, Israel. South border, the Sinai, which is owned by Egypt but run by terrorists who don't like the Palestinians.
That's right.
West border, the fucking sea, which the coral reef is where you get all the fish, is 9 miles out, which is Israeli territory. So there's no fucking fish.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Yes.
So you created
nobody knows
this.
that.
Yeah, but I've heard this before.
Yeah, it's true.
Over the years.
It's true. You can't fish.
So how do you, if you're Israel, how do you not create that? You're trying to throw them a bone, give them land, but you then create a space where...
Well, there was an idea that came up in the early 1990s.
What's that?
It was a Saudi idea. The Saudi idea was to use Saudi money to build a port and an airport. So you can close them all off. You can run a border fence or wall, a mile out into the sea. You can mine the area around the border, do whatever you want, have ships off the coast, but let them at least trade. You build them a port so they can have ships coming in with food and medicine and whatever, going out with whatever products they can make in Gaza. I have no idea, what that could be. And an airport that would connect them with the rest of the world. And the Israelis said, absolutely not.
Why? Now that's stupid.
I know.
Why'd they say no? Because they wanted it?
In 1991, I think they hadn't gotten there yet intellectually. You know what I mean? But things have become so desperate in the intervening years. I mean, we're talking about 34 years ago. Things are so desperate now that unless you want to just complete this genocide that you've started, you're going to have to throw them a bone.
What about 2005? Why didn't they bring that back up?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
See, there's not a defense for that. That's the kind of stuff there's not a defense for.
That's right.
On the broad basis, I understand why they're like, well, we can't really let them in here because, you're letting in, it's like Swiss cheese in the wrong way.
Yeah.
I get that. It's just, goddamn, that's one of the most cynical situations in the world.
Awful. Just awful.
I just don't know if it'll ever get solved.
Yeah, I have to agree.
But you guys, you started to say this earlier, and it was very interesting. You had a very telling 30 to 35-minute segment with Danny Jones and Andy Bustamante where the two of you, who were from different eras of CIA, told the same story about how this is behind the scenes with, the frenemies kind of thing that's going on. You already started to say there were red lights. You're told that day one, it's like you see China, you see Russia, you see Israel as like spy threats or whatever. That's
right.
So people at CIA, I would imagine, have a love-hate relationship here. Is that fair to say?
It's mostly just a hate relationship. I never met anybody at the CIA who was pro-Israel. Never.
Not one.
Not a single person. No, not a single person. And it's because they make it so hard to like them. If we're supposed to be their best friends, we have this special relationship. Well, I'll tell you the same story I told Danny Jones. I worked with this guy for years, and he married a woman in the office. Really terrific people, both of them. Terrific people. And when I was going out to Bahrain on my rotation to the State Department, the wife was going out to Jerusalem because she got the same rotation to the State Department. So because she had worked with the Israelis for many years, the station decided to declare the two of them to the Israelis. So they land and they go straight to Mossad, and the chief said, these are my officers. She's on rotation to the State Department, and he's just going to study Arabic at the University of Tel Aviv. Right? No harm. So they're there for a little while. They go to a party at the ambassador's residence, and they come home, and all of their living room furniture had been rearranged. And they were like, not cool. But this is what the Israelis do. They break in the house, they rearrange all your furniture just to say, fuck you, we can do anything we want. So they're there working, months pass, they're having a good time. They go to the ambassador's Christmas party. Now they're living in Jerusalem. The embassy at the time was in Tel Aviv. And so it's about a 30 or 40 minute drive to get from one city to the other. They come home at the end of the party, and people had taken shits in all of their toilets in their house. Every toilet had shit in it. Not cool. They're not doing anything. They're not working against the Israelis. They're just doing normal stuff. He's studying Arabic. She's just in the embassy's, economic section or whatever. And then when their tour was over, 2-year tour, the ambassador threw a going away party for them, which is a normal thing. And they get back to the house, and the dog is under the dining room table whimpering because somebody had cut the dog's tail off, and they wrapped it with gauze and with medical tape. Why would you do something like that? What do you hope to gain except to make us hate you? If you're trying to win friends and influence people, that's really not the way you're going to want to go. So now here are these people who, if anything, were, moderately supportive of the Israelis, who came home only with bitterness and hatred toward the Israelis for this harassment that lasted for 2 years. Why? Why would you do that? What do you hope to accomplish?
Do you ever think that some of that is people who want you to think it's them? I'm steel manning it, but...
In a place like Israel, though, there's nobody else sophisticated enough to do something like that.
That's what I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not great because, again, I understand where they're coming from. They want our help on stuff, but you got to actually, to hear you talk about the Five Eyes earlier and give me some surprising answers on that. There's a different way you're talking about this one.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's their game to lose, and they're doing that because it's like they could be like the Five Eyes with you.
Could be.
And they're deciding to just be a pain in the balls.
Going to go it alone. Mm-hmm.
How do you see this current situation winding, the actual Gaza issue right now? Not the two-state solution. That's not winding down anytime soon. But how do you see this situation winding down?
I don't think the Palestinians are going to go anywhere. I think that as awful as things are, you got a territory with 2 million people, probably 100,000 dead. The Lancet, the medical journal of the UK, puts it at 100 to 180,000 dead because we don't know how many bodies are under the rubble yet. They're just counting people who are still missing.
It's horrible.
It's horrible. So you got 2 million people, not a single working hospital, no water, no food, no medication. It's the worst humanitarian disaster since the end of the Second World War. And I read an article just the other day in the Wall Street Journal that said that it's going to take them 40 years just to clear out the rubble. It's been so utterly destroyed. Crazy. The Egyptians aren't going to take anybody. The Jordanians aren't going to take anybody. The Albanians are not going to take anybody. And the Indonesians are like, leave us out of this. So those guys aren't going anywhere. They're going to have to rebuild. But at the same time, before the fighting started, the Israelis allowed the Palestinians 2 hours of water and 5 hours of electricity every day. Not because they didn't have the capability to provide the water and the electricity, just to screw them. So every Palestinian would fill the bathtub up with water, and they would use that for cooking for the remainder of the day, because that's all they were allowed. Yeah. The Israelis are going to have to treat the Palestinians as human beings because they've already lost most of the world. And I can't help but to think that
a lot of the world.
Yeah. And Kamala Harris's position on the Gaza war cost her the presidency. I firmly believe that. It cost her both Michigan and Pennsylvania. She may have won the election if she had taken a principled stand. You can still be pro-Israel and be anti-genocide. But you've got to put your foot down.
That's the problem, though. There are some people who do not speak for all Israelis by any stretch, who just have the ability to get reach who are making that middle ground impossible.
Yes.
I will be called names
Exactly.
for things I
Well,
said
now-
today that are perfectly factual, or we're
Yes.
perfectly leaving open the possibility that it's not something else. And I'm someone who comes down the middle on this.
We've gotten to the point where if you criticize Benjamin Netanyahu as a person or as a politician, you're branded as anti-Semitic.
Which is fucking crazy.
Outrageous. I'll tell you, my college roommate, I love the guy like a brother. And he's a very religious Jew to the point where he's become a very prominent rabbi in Atlanta. And he told me that he was having a political discussion with somebody who didn't know him.
Mm-hmm.
And this person says, "You sound anti-Semitic."
No.
And he says, "Actually, I'm very Semitic. I'm the rabbi of, such and
Taking
such."
the hat off like
Yeah.
you see?
It's like, what are you talking about? But this is where we found ourselves.
Yeah.
You can't criticize anything Israeli. Otherwise, you're branded. And that's just sick.
Yeah, but the tide will, unfortunately, like you said, people are so sick of that from a small group of people that they're going to ruin it for everybody else.
I think you're right.
And the tide will
It's going to change. That's right.
Which is kind of wild. So my goal is to have in people like you who can have some nuance on it and some experience with it. And then also I'm working on doing 2 podcasts with one guy that I have to get who is extremely pro-Israel and who I like a lot. I think he makes some amazing points. And then another guy who I would say is pretty strongly anti-Israel, who I also like a lot, and I think makes some amazing points. And I would like to find some nuance in it because, John, I can tell you one thing that's not going to happen. We're not going to make a 2-state solution or peace in the Middle East on the Julian Dorey podcast.
No.
It's not going to happen.
No.
I'm not under that delusion. So if we're going to have any effect whatsoever, it should just be that people get to hear the different arguments and see that this is far more complicated.
Oh, boy, is
I'm going to push back on both of those guys.
I think I mentioned to you one time, I ran into Dennis Ross, who was the special envoy for the Arab-Israeli peace process for years across presidents, across Clinton and George W. Bush. I ran into him in the cafeteria at the State Department one time, and we sat together. And I asked him about new ideas. And he said, there are no new ideas. Every idea has been thought of, and it's been dismissed by one side or the other. So we've got to get everybody to the point where they realize that there are no new ideas and that we go back to some of these old ideas and start to negotiate.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. I got to run to the bathroom real quick, John. We got to talk Russia, Ukraine, and some stuff on China. We put a pin in.
Sounds good.
All right. We'll be right back. We are back on now, John. You had a CIA joke? Is that right?
I'm driving to this event, and I'm on the way to the event. I see the sign that's nailed to a telephone pole, and it says "Talking Dog." I was like, "Talking dog? What could that mean?" I wasn't sure. Talking dog for sale. I'm like, okay, all right. I'm interested enough. I'm going to see what this is about. I knock on the door. I said to the guy, "I saw your sign. You have a talking dog for sale." He said, "Yeah, it's around back." I said, "Can I see it?" He said, "Sure." I go around back, and there's a dog there, just kind of a mutt. And I said, "Hello." And the dog goes, "Hello." And I said, "You do talk?" And he said, "Yes, I talk." And I said, "I've never seen a talking dog before." And he said, "Oh, I've got kind of a long history. I used to work for the CIA." I said, "I used to work for the CIA." I said, "What did you do there?" He said, "I was in operations." I said, "I was in operations too." "What division were you in?" He said, "I kind of went back and forth between divisions. For example," he said, "I went into Kim Jong-un's office and I sat there and I listened to what they were saying. And I went back out and I told the CIA. They never suspected a dog would understand. And then I went to bin Laden's compound and I was listening to bin Laden, what he was planning. I went back to the CIA and I told them what bin Laden was planning. And now I can go into any president's office or palace or whatever. I listen and then I come back and report." I said, "That's incredible." So I said to the guy, "How much you asking for this dog?" He says, $20. I said, $20? Why so little? He goes, "That dog's a damn liar. He hasn't done any of that stuff."
John. Damn it. There was another joke you told us off camera, too. I wish you could tell on camera. That one was good, too. God damn. How do I even, like, transition into Ukraine after that? Like, so, about the war where fucking 1 million people have died. From talking dogs to the war. All right.
Yeah, the war is not good.
Yeah, so another one that's, like, hard to talk about with people. To me, it seems like there's egg on every possible face involved with this. Obviously, Russia, Ukraine, the people funding both.
The U.S.?
Right? I empathize, of course, with all the people on the ground who are dying. And
Awful. Terrible
know,
situation.
Obviously, Russia invaded. Very bad. And I feel bad for the Ukrainian people in that way. It seems like their government's kind of left them behind.
Yeah, I would agree. So many different people, so many different governments are at fault here. We really do have to go back to the 90s. You know, once the Soviet Union fell apart, Boris Yeltsin told Bill Clinton that the Russians were interested in joining NATO. And Clinton said, I don't think that's a very good idea. And then years later, Putin told Obama, listen, we're interested in joining NATO. And Obama said, yeah, I don't think that's really a very good idea. Not going to happen. So what they ended up agreeing on in negotiations was that NATO would not expand to Russia's borders, which it immediately did.
Right.
Okay, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Poland. And they took it. The Russians just took it. They would protest diplomatically, and they would get the middle finger. So they didn't trust us. They didn't have reason to trust us. We promised them that NATO would not expand to their border. NATO immediately expanded to their border. It's an existential threat to the Russians. Then a pro-Russian prime minister is elected in Ukraine. And in 2014, we encouraged, I'm using the word encouraged on purpose. Others would say we implemented a coup, a soft coup.
Yeah.
A change of government. You don't have to call it a coup, whatever it was.
Can you explain what happened there? You're talking about Maidan.
Yeah, I'm talking about Maidan. It depends really on who you believe, but there was this pro-Russian prime minister, and we encouraged an uprising to depose him. He was deposed, and a pro-American prime minister took office. The Russians responded angrily, as you might expect, by taking Crimea. This is actually not as big a deal as the Ukrainians might have you believe.
Why not?
Because Crimea was only a part of Ukraine since 1955. It was always a part of Russia, but it was given as a gift by the Soviet leadership to the Ukrainian people.
Why did they give it to them as a gift?
For their steadfastness during the Second World War. So 10 years after the war, it was to show the people's, quote-unquote, appreciation for those Ukrainians who weren't Nazis or Nazi sympathizers. And because, frankly, it was the Ukrainians that withstood the brunt of the Nazi attack that ended with the Battle of Stalingrad. So it's ethnically Russian, even though it belonged to Ukraine.
So when they gave it to them, it's not like they said, we're going to take our people out there as well and you guys can fill it up. The same people stayed.
Correct, because the Soviet Union was all one country. So it was the Ukrainian SSR, the Russian SSR, the Kazakh SSR. They were all part of the same country, Soviet Socialist Republic, right? That wasn't a problem until 2014, when the Russians go in and say, now it's Russian again, and there's nothing you can do about it. That became a problem for the United States. We started with the sanctions, and the propaganda began, and the Russians were steadfast. We're not leaving. We're just not going to leave. And you guys overthrew the government of Ukraine, and so shame on you for installing this pro-American prime minister. You and I were talking offline before we started the podcast about the fact that so many Americans either ignore or don't know that every single year for decades, the United Nations has ranked Ukraine as one of the most corrupt governments on the planet.
Right. They used to report it in the New York Times, too.
Yeah, they used to. Until it wasn't,
Yeah.
politically correct,
That's
I
right.
guess. So the Russians finally had enough. And 3 years ago, they invaded. And the way they invaded was they did it very poorly.
Yeah.
In that they came in from Belarus, which makes Belarus a combatant. It's a war crime in and of itself to use a third party to invade another country.
Yeah.
The United States responded much more quickly and much more severely than the Russians had expected. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, said
Same
that,
thing.
yeah, same thing, said that in the inner circle, in Putin's inner circle, they were surprised at how stinging the sanctions were. They were surprised at how quickly the U.S. was able to implement the sanctions. Now, here we are 3 years later. The sanctions mean nothing to the Russians. Of course, they would like to sell energy in Western Europe, but they've gotten around it because what the Europeans used to buy, the Indians and the Chinese now buy. So no big deal. They've survived the sanctions just perfectly fine. In the meantime, Volodymyr Zelensky gets himself elected prime minister. He has a reputation as being not as corrupt as his predecessors. And, funny thing about Zelensky, he was a very popular TV comedian.
Yes, he was an actor.
He was an actor. And he had no political experience, but people liked him because he was funny. And so he won the election and immediately becomes a wartime prime minister.
Does he really talk like that? Yes, I am Volodymyr Zelensky.
I don't know.
There's no
man.
way, right?
It seems
That's gotta be
phony
an
to me.
act.
Yeah, I think it is.
He's like 5'2".
He
No
is.
shot.
He's a little tiny guy.
Yeah.
That's why everybody makes fun of him when he wears a military uniform. He's never been in the military.
Yeah, he didn't reach the you have to be this tall sign.
Yeah, exactly. So the real fight is over something called the Donbas. It's primarily the regions of Donetsk and Luhansk.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is Ukrainian territory, but most of the people who live there are ethnic Russians, and they speak Russian as their primary language. I know some Donbas Ukrainians. My best friend is married to a Donbas Ukrainian, and they want to be Russians.
Really?
Yeah.
Even now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They felt left out, that they were sort of cut out of Russia when
were they cut out?
When the borders were drawn, when the Soviet Union fell apart. Like, hey, we're Russian. We're ethnic Russian. How come we have to be in Ukraine?
So it's way more recent than Crimea even.
Oh, yeah. No. It happened in
Crimea was
1990.
Yeah, but Crimea was 55.
Oh, yeah. I thought you meant Crimea in 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So, in the end, to make a long story short, something that many of us said, analysts, observers, regional experts, was this war could go on forever, or the Ukrainians can concede Donbas and Crimea, and then there's going to be peace. And in the end, whether they do it of their own volition or they do it because they're forced to militarily, that's probably what's going to happen. Donald Trump last week said, we're going to have peace. We can do it in one day. Donetsk and Luhansk, go with the Russians. Crimea, go with the Russians. Peace is at hand. And Zelensky's like, whoa, wait a minute.
He's calling up Lex Friedman again. Get back in here.
Yeah. But, this is a very Trump thing to do.
Yes.
He sees issues in black and white.
I see a deal.
Exactly.
Make a deal.
It's all about a deal, but he will cut out the people that he thinks or doesn't think want to participate in the deal. Like, for example, the Abraham Accords. Peace in our time in the Middle East. Nobody told the Palestinians. And it's the same thing here. He says, a couple days ago, Zelensky's approval rating is 4%. No, it's actually 47%.
It is?
Yeah, it's not 4%.
Where's he getting the 4? He just dropped the 7?
He just makes it up. Yeah, he just makes it up.
Par for the course.
It's 4%. He better hope he makes it to the next election. Well, that was a shot at a comment that Zelensky made when Trump called him a dictator the day before. He said, I'm not a dictator. And Trump said there are no elections in Ukraine. Well, the answer is because the Ukrainian constitution says that if martial law has been declared by the prime minister and approved by the parliament, all elections are canceled. So is he a dictator? Kinda. But it's got the legality of the Constitution
Right,
behind
that's
it.
a real loophole right there.
It's a loophole. Yeah. I was always one of these people who tried to be consistent in that, look, if we're going to be peace activists, right, we're going to go out there saying, oh, we should all be at peace and work together and diplomacy and all this stuff, then we really have to be for peace. I was opposed to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but I'm opposed to the continuation of the war too. Enough. A million people have been killed.
Yeah.
What, do you want to kill another million and then really devastate the whole place? Nobody's going to win then. Let's just get this thing over with. Okay, you're going to take a little haircut territorially. All right. You'll live. You'll survive it.
All right. So do you think that other people, and I'm not talking like the worst aspects of like the military industrial complex.
Sure.
Like, I'm talking reasonable people who may be like, I don't know about that. Do you
See,
think
that's the issue right there? The Washington swells want to fight this thing to the last man. You know this bad joke that the U.S. wants to fight to the last Ukrainian. Well, that's true. All we want to do is kill Russians, to paraphrase Gus Avrakatis back in the 1980s. All I want to do is kill Russians. They don't care how long it takes. And frankly, and I don't mean to be cynical, but this is a very good war for the military industrial complex.
Oh, of course.
Very good.
We're going to get there.
People are making lots and lots of money.
Yes.
So you really want that to go away? What are the shareholders going to think?
Well, that's the thing. Like, the reasonable people want to push back because they feel like the precedent set of kowtowing a little bit to a guy like Putin is bad, because then where will he stop?
Right.
Because he is a bulldog.
Right.
And then on the other side, you have exactly what you're talking about, which is, you know, and there's two sides to this coin too, maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong. The one side is it is the military-industrial complex just coming in and saying this is good for business. We can make a lot of money. BlackRock can come in and fucking clean everything up. Cool. Everyone's happy. The other side of it is in the Cold War with like a China, forget Russia for a second, their GDP is the size of Italy. No disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
China's GDP is creeping up right up on us. We obviously are competing on a lot of things around the world. Ukraine in that area is a very strategic area to make, and I hate this word, but to make these words a client state.
Well, it's the breadbasket of Europe. It produces much of Europe's grain, and it also has rare earth metals that we would have to either otherwise buy from the Chinese or from the Afghans. I mean, the Congo only has so much that we need. We got to get the rest of it somewhere else, and the Ukrainians have it.
And you said this is, and I've always heard this as I pointed out, but like this is a place that was always called corrupt.
Oh my God!
And why did they call it corrupt? What, because Russia was involved in their politics, or a lot of other things?
No. It's about cash. It's about money. And I'll give you a couple of examples.
I knew you would.
So I mentioned my best friend from college. He's married to a Ukrainian woman of Russian extraction. And her brother still lives in Ukraine. So my buddy was doing relatively well in life, decided to help his new brother-in-law out by going in with him on an investment. They bought the first combination gas station car wash in Donbas. First one. Novelty. So
Good place to launder money too.
Well, that's a different conversation. So they buy it from this Ukrainian guy, and as soon as they effect the deal and they pay the money and they get the deed, the guy sues them and says, "Oh, they stole it from me. I want all the money back." And he bribes a judge to rule in his favor.
Oh boy.
So my friend has never dealt with anything like this before. He hires an attorney in Kiev, says, what should I do? The guy's like, oh, we're so corrupt here. What you're going to have to do is sue him back and buy a judge at the appellate level. Yeah, at the appellate level. So he does. He bribes this judge at the appellate level. And of course he wins. But the original owner then sued, countersued, and bought a judge in the Supreme Court.
Oh my God.
So my friend enlists the American ambassador. And the ambassador writes a letter to the governor of the Donbas. And I'm sure they all laughed at him. Because my buddy wasn't willing to shell out another $25,000 for his own Supreme Court judge, he just let the thing go. They lost everything they had.
Wow.
Second example, and this is very controversial, and it really hits me in the gut. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church has been under the jurisdiction of the Russian Orthodox Church for a little bit more than 1,000 years. Okay? In the hierarchy of the Orthodox Church, there is no difference between the Russians and the Ukrainians. So Hillary Clinton, when she was the Secretary of State, asked Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew I of Constantinople if he would declare the Ukrainian Orthodox Church to be what's called autocephalous. It runs itself, no longer subject to the whims of the Russian Patriarch. And the Patriarch said, I'm not sure that's a good idea. They've been under Russian jurisdiction for 1,000 years. Politically, I really can't do that. And Hillary allegedly said, would $20 million help make the decision? Well, the Greek Orthodox Church is under the thumb of the Neo-Ottoman Turks. And so he said, yeah, we could use the $20 million. So she said, we have to give it to you through Ukrainian banks. That's fine. So the State Department wires $20 million, probably through USAID, now in retrospect.
Sounds about right.
They wire the $20 million to some Ukrainian bank. They do whatever it is that they do behind closed doors in Ukrainian banks. And then they send $15 million to the Patriarch. And he says, wait a minute.
Where'd the 5 go?
This is supposed to be 20. Where'd the 5 go? And the State Department said, oh, well, we don't know anything about that. All we know is we paid. So now you have to declare independence for the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which he did. And it immediately caused a near war situation between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. But even for religious purposes, religio, military, political, however you want to say it, I just made up a word, the entire culture is corrupt. Every level of it is corrupt. So if we're sending 40 billion this time, 8 billion that time, 500 million the next time, another 15 billion the next time, where the heck is that money going? Now, it's one thing when the Pentagon says, look, when we say we're sending this money, we're not actually sending cash. We're sending it in kind. So we take $40 billion, we give it to Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin, and then they send weapons, weapon systems, planes, whatever. Yeah, but how did this terrorist attack take place in Paris, for example, using a rifle that had a serial number indicating that it was assigned to the Ukrainian military? Because they're taking the weapons and selling them on the black market to gangsters and mafiosi and criminals and whatever, and just pocketing the money. You know, it's like in Goodfellas. You buy a case of liquor for
goes right out the back door.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's crazy. That was in my head while you were saying this. I'm picturing
that's it. That's corruption. Yeah. And I'll tell you, as an American who really does not have a dog in this fight.
That's not what I hear, John.
Oh, yeah?
I hear you're a Russian asset.
Oh, I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that I'm a Russian asset.
You want to deny that on the record?
Yeah, I'm not a Russian asset.
All right, good.
Yeah.
I believe you.
No, I don't work for the Russians.
Okay. Continue.
But as an American, I resent my taxpayer money just being squandered like that. When we've got, bridges here that are falling into the rivers beneath them, and our kids have to have bake sales to buy school supplies, and we've got some of the worst roads in the Western world.
Yeah.
How come the Chinese can afford all this stuff, and we can't? How come the Chinese have a bullet train that goes 300 miles an hour and we don't? We haven't replaced our rails since the Civil War. Did you know that?
Well, they are replacing them in Hoboken right now. I'm not going to lie to you.
They've really torn it up, haven't they?
It's happening.
Wow.
They are fixing them.
They're just building a new tunnel north of Baltimore right now. The tunnel that they're using presently was built just before the Civil War. And they say that they've been unable to upgrade the Acela tracks because the tunnel is so narrow, they need a wider space. So for the first time in 170 years, we're finally going to upgrade the train tracks.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. But look at it this way too. We spend more on the military than the next 8 largest countries combined.
Yeah.
That's not cool.
I think it's way past where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And once again, I see a middle ground here because I see people who are like, defund all this shit.
Right.
I, for one, will say if there's one part of the military industrial complex that I like, it's that we have bases all over the world.
Yeah.
I like that if we need it. The
Agreed.
idea, though, that we have to say, let's hit the war button instead of the let's hit the slow down button and the diplomacy button is where I have a real problem. And
That's
it comes
right.
back to the funding that you're talking about. If there's too much of it where, we can't even track this stuff. The fucking
Right.
Pentagon hasn't passed an audit since the Vietnam War ended. That's an issue.
You're absolutely right. Year after year after year, Congress appropriates more money for the Pentagon budget than the Pentagon asks for. Like we want $750 billion. No, we're going to give you $850 billion. And
You get a car. You get a car.
Exactly.
You get a car.
Thank you, Oprah. That's exactly right. And then we can't understand why the Pentagon can't pass an audit.
Yeah.
They had PricewaterhouseCoopers there 2 years ago. They did a 2-year audit, and then they just walked away. They said, we can't figure this out. We can't figure this out. There's no excuse for that.
No, there's not. There's not. But we've been now we're literally recording just past exactly 3 years into this war.
Yes.
Because we're going to put this episode out
literally
right away, next couple of days. But, the funding, I can see where you want to take advantage of the opportunity. I draw the line at we're at 1 million lives and like, no offense, the fact that Zelensky thinks that this is his decision to make is fucking insane because my money bought something and it bought our right to make the fucking decision.
100%. You are right. We should get a say. I made kind
Get
of
a say. We need to make
the
shot.
decision. I made a joke when we first started talking today that this lefty is becoming a Donald Trump true believer. Trump just said the war's going to end. Period. Like it or lump it, the war's going to end. Make whatever plans you need to make. And he's exactly right. And I'll tell you where he really won me. He won me yesterday, and it was just such a crazy push notification on my phone that I saw. I didn't believe it. He's going to cut the Pentagon budget by 8% a year for the next 5 years.
Yep.
Show me one Democrat who's ever even proposed such a cut.
Well, they used to. It's come full circle.
In the olden days of
that's what I'm saying.
the 60s and 70s.
It's come full circle.
Full circle.
Where there are liberal ideas that are now that are now like opted by the right, and the left's like, no.
We've seen, I mentioned this on a podcast the other day. When I was in college, in history class, we studied what was then called the watershed election of 1932. 1932 was a historic election in American politics, Roosevelt. Because the Republican Party was the liberal party. It was the party of the North. It was the party of labor. And it was the Democrats that were the conservative Southern party, the slaveholders. And they switched sides in the election of 1932. Franklin Roosevelt had been a Republican. He had been the governor of New York. He had been the Secretary of the Navy. And he was a Republican. Of course, his cousin, Teddy Roosevelt, was also a Republican. So he was economically a Republican, but the Republicans had led the country to the Great Depression. And so Roosevelt decided to run for president as a Democrat. He was Democratic governor. He decided to run as a Democrat, but to adopt a lot of the Republican Party's policies, especially on labor, right? And on poverty. And so that election in 1932 caused the two parties to switch sides ideologically. So we studied that for decades. Here we are. My position is between 2016 and 2024, we've seen a slow motion watershed led by Donald Trump, where the parties are switching sides again. Maybe not all the way.
Yeah, not all the way, but
like
yes.
we saw in 32.
Yeah.
But it's the Republicans who are the anti-war party, for example. It's the Republicans who are the labor party. Listen, when 67% of organized labor families, union families, vote Republican,
that's nuts.
That's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, Reagan wished he had numbers like that. And he won a majority, not like Trump did.
Not like that.
So couple that with the fact that the Democrats just have no idea what they're doing right now. It's just a state of chaos over there at the DNC. We don't even know who the Democratic Party's leaders are right now. There are 4 or 5 people who claim to be the leaders of the Democratic Party. Are they? Really?
You know, it's a handful of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's so fit. This is why I feel like it's a uniparty system, because if you gave anyone with a normal head the power to go like run the DNC tomorrow, they could win over the country immediately.
Yeah.
Cut the woke shit.
Right.
Cut the trans shit. Cut the
It killed
vaccine
them.
shit.
Mm-hmm.
Cut the fucking don't look at the border shit. Cut the endless war shit, which I will correct one thing. There is still a contingent of the Republican Party that does support that.
Yeah, and they came out, they reared their heads this week.
Yes.
Yes.
And then I forget what the 6th one is. There's one more I have in there somewhere. But these are very common sense type things. By the way, stances that like Obama had 10 years ago.
Yes.
You know? And they don't do that. And what's now it's like people are so pissed off about it that I see the hard whipsaw back. And that could have some reverberations that people, including myself, aren't going to like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the equal but opposite reaction physics law of life. Like, this is what happens when you go too far with stupid shit. People are going to see through it.
So true.
You know, when I see someone with a Ukraine flag in their bio, I can go through their next fucking 40 policies word for word. And they probably don't even know what these policies mean, but that's what they were told to do.
Absolutely right. And you know, when you see on the evening news Hillary Clinton literally kneeling in front of Henry Kissinger, that's not a brag.
No.
Henry Kissinger's a war criminal.
Yeah.
When you see Kamala Harris championing and announcing her endorsement by Dick Cheney, that is not a brag.
You forgot the IRS, too.
And the IRS.
And Diddy clients all the same week.
Yes.
Trifecta.
Yeah, seriously. So, you know, I came from a Democratic family. My grandfather had a framed picture of Franklin Roosevelt on top of the TV all the years I was growing up until he died. I still have the picture. I was a 3rd generation Democrat. And I quit the Democrats in 2012. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I agree with you that on most issues, we've got a uniparty. 2 sides of the same coin. You can sort of tinker around the edges with some differences, but for the most part, they're the same. They're getting farther apart now.
Oh, let me correct that because I explained that wrong then. I'm not saying they're the same in what they say verbally.
No, I agree.
What I'm saying is the reason I think there's a uniparty is because these people openly endorse the 5 or 6 stances I just gave, and they know it's bullshit.
Sure.
So and they know it's against the polls, so why are they doing it?
It's the same thing with Israel.
Yeah.
They'll tell you privately, oh my God, what's happening in Gaza? Oh my God, all these 100,000 people, they're almost all women and children. Oh my God, how's this happening? How's it happening? You gave Benjamin Netanyahu 186 standing ovations in his last 2 speeches.
It was 4 times more per second than Kim Jong-un. There's something like that. Pull that.
See?
Can we get that stat? Yeah.
Outrageous.
It's crazy.
It is. It's crazy. And you know, another thing is corruption with the Democrats. I use this example all the time. I'm going to use it again. How in the world can Bernie Sanders win 60% to Hillary Clinton's 40% in the West Virginia caucus and the Wyoming caucus, and Bernie Sanders doesn't win a single delegate. Hillary Clinton wins every single delegate.
Yeah.
Well, how is that democracy?
He got fucked twice.
And he took it, which really made me angry.
Yes.
He took it.
Because, like, you know, I disagree. He obviously has some extreme policies. I'm not where he is for sure. But, like, I respected him as a guy who he had his finger on the pulse. He knew where the problems were with the average American. Like, he and Donald Trump simultaneously in 2015, 2016 understood that. And it's like, I think he still understands a lot of those things.
Yeah.
But he won't. You know, this is a guy who's been listed as independent for so many years, too. Like,
most
now
of his life.
But it's like something stopping him from saying the quiet part out loud. What is that?
When I worked in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I had this routine. I'm an early riser, so I get to the office early. I put on a pot of coffee, and then I would go downstairs to the Senate cafeteria to get a bagel. And every single day, there's Bernie Sanders sitting in the very first table, inviting anybody who wants to sit, talk about any issue they want to talk about. Didn't even care if you were from Vermont or not. And the only thing he insisted on was that you call him Bernie.
I love that.
I loved it too. And then, you know that old phrase from Animal House, thank you, sir. May I have another?
Yeah.
Well, it's like that's what he said to the DNC.
Yeah.
Here, let's give you a whack across the ass. Thank you, sir. May I have another?
Something else is there.
Something's going on.
Something else is there. Because, like, to his credit, he still, when the DNC ran Kamala and they were embarrassed by that, they ran from a lot of, non-mainstream media. They're like, oh, let's not do it. And it cost them the election. Right. He's the one guy who didn't. Mm-hmm. He still went on these shows while this was all going on. Mm-hmm. Gave his, and I respect that, but it's like, what's the other part,
People ask me all the time who I like for 2028. And the answer is nobody.
Yeah.
I don't like anybody.
Join the club. Yeah.
I hate to say that, but I really don't like anybody.
Everyone's bought by somebody.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how it is.
Oh, I'll tell you who's the worst offender.
Who's the worst?
It's got to be John Fetterman. I'll tell you. I was a true believer in Fetterman because he's from Braddock, Pennsylvania. I'm from Newcastle, Pennsylvania. They're very close.
I know where you're going with this, John.
And he, I hate the shorts and the sweatshirt. It's like, dude, have some dignity and put on a friggin' tie when you go into the floor of the Senate, the most important deliberative body in the world. Have some respect. Anyway, I sent $50, which was a lot of money to me because, I don't have $50. I have 5 kids. I'm still fighting legal issues. I sent him $50. And it's like he became a neocon as soon as he got elected. And I take my son to this Ohio State, Michigan State football game last winter. And he says to me, is that John Fetterman sitting down there? It's like 15 rows in front of us. I said, I think it is John Fetterman.
Unmistakable.
So I shout, Fetterman! Hey, Fetterman! And he turns around and he doesn't see me, but he's like waving like this. And I said, I want my $50 back, you coward. And he just waving. And then he turns around and sits down again. My son's like, you sent him $50? I said, yeah, I thought he was a lefty. And he's not. He's a fake, just like everybody else in the Democratic Party.
He got bought on some issues.
He sure did.
Yeah.
I remember not too long ago, they were calling him, jelly brain and all kinds of terrible things because he had a stroke and he couldn't get a word out and he got killed in the debate because he got confused and from his TBI. And then, no. I will die for Israel. I will stand with Benjamin Netanyahu. It's like, I want my $50 back, you liar.
I hear stuff like that and I'm like, that's not natural.
It's not.
Because I'm sure he was somewhat of a supporter, but it got strong. Like there was
off the charts
overnight. And you're like, wait a minute.
Off the charts. And then he meets with Trump and he's like, Mr. President, keep up your support of Israel. Our Israeli friends need you. It's like, are you kidding me?
It's just strange.
Who are you?
It's strange, man. And and the thing that sucks is like not just the Israelis, but like I have Jewish friends who like people ask them about this and I'm like, what the fuck do I know?
Yeah.
I don't support this shit. But your society is now turning in on itself, and this is one of the things, and I worry about this all the time. This is one of those things because of what some of these guys are doing and then what some of our idiots say about it.
Mm-hmm.
I just, look, I am cynical on this. I've never had a politician at the national level on this show. One time I had a woman on who was running for attorney general of a state, but it was never discussed. She was not on about that. No one knows that that was the case, and she didn't bring it up. She's awesome. She didn't bring it up at all. It's probably why she lost, because she's maybe not a full-blown politician like the rest of them.
Right.
But, I've always stayed away from it because cynically I'm like, who wants that job?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the people who want to be in that role, especially at this point in our history and the way these people act, what they do, their cute little club that you know a lot better than me down in D.C.
This is what I tried to touch on earlier, too. In the 70s and even the 80s, there were some giants on Capitol Hill, true independent thinkers, true intellectuals. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Barry Goldwater, Ted Kennedy, both parties. And now they're all midgets, all of them.
Yeah, and it's like you go on OpenSecrets.com and you can see
gosh,
all the
yes.
different companies paying them.
Laid out in black and white.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like even with some of the UFO stuff, like the reps who were blocking like the Schumer amendment and whatever, were the guys who represent where Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is, and I forget what the other one is, but the one down in Alabama. And it's like, yeah, no shit, they're blocking this. Like, look at who's, you know what I mean? Like, come on. Like, there should be some sort of rule. Like, all right, we're going to vote on X today. If you are funded by anyone that has to do with X, you cannot vote on this.
Yeah.
And then they'd all sit down and no one would vote.
There was a scene in the Simpsons movie where Congress is going to vote on the bill to save Springfield, right? And just as they're going to vote, a congressman stands up. He says, Mr. Speaker, I want to add an amendment to appropriate $5 million for the perverted arts. And so the speaker says, okay, all those in favor of the Save Springfield, Fund the Perverted Arts bill, say aye. The nays have it. The bill loses. That's Congress today.
Yeah.
I was on a UFO podcast yesterday.
Oh, you were?
And
what podcast?
A guy named Chris, I'm going to find it.
We're going to get it?
Yeah, he's a good guy. Let's see. He's a former F-16 pilot, and that's how I saved it in my...
Oh, is he the Air Force Paranormal Chris?
Yes.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen him on Twitter.
Nice guy. So we were talking about this, and he said essentially the same thing, that, just as it looks like this information is going to be released, somebody kills it. And I said, well, what about these videos that came out 2 years ago? He said, no, all of those were leaked. None of those were part of the release. There were documents that released, but none of the videos were released. Somebody just proactively leaked them. Yeah.
You never saw any of that stuff when you were back in CIA, did you?
No.
Were you curious about it?
I asked about it. And
who'd you ask?
I asked my boss. And he said, that's the first question that all of us have when we get here. And he said, I'll tell you what they told me when I got here.
Oh, no.
All that shit's at the Pentagon. We don't have anything to do with it. I don't know. I'll tell you, man, I saw something when I was young that I'll never forget.
What was that?
My mom and dad bought a restaurant in Sharon, Pennsylvania. Now, I grew up in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. It's about 20 miles away, 15 miles away. But to get from Newcastle to Sharon, you have to go through Amish country. And it's very, very dark because there's no electricity. The Amish live without electricity. So my dad and I worked midnight shift on Fridays and Saturdays. So we'd leave the house around 10, get there at 10:30, start working 11 to 7. And we're driving through Amish country, just the two of us, and there's this brilliant flash of white light. We both looked up, and then there's a second flash, and then a third flash. And then this trapezoid lights up. It's got these bright orange lights in the four corners, bright enough that it illuminated the whole thing, whatever it was. My dad pulls over. He's like, what is that? I don't know. We get out. We're looking at it. This guy pulls up behind us, gets out of his car. He's like, what is that thing? And we're like, we don't know. And it's just hovering there, and it's completely silent. So as we're looking at it, and this lasted, I'm going to say this lasted a good 10 seconds. And then it goes whoosh, like that at this fantastic speed that I've never seen before or since. And then it was gone. We get back in the car. We start driving to Sharon. I said to my dad, should we call somebody? Should we like call the cops or something? I was 17 at the time. And he says, and tell them what? We saw a flying saucer and then it flew away. Yeah. People are going to think we're nuts. And so we didn't tell anybody. I told my mom the next day. And my dad's like, yeah, it's true. That's what we saw.
You think that was a DARPA weapon?
It could have been.
Yeah. That's my inkling on a lot of this stuff.
You know, at first people said, like my friends, they want to know if I had been drinking, which we did a lot of back in the day. I said, no, I wasn't drinking. I was with my dad. They said, well, it had to be a balloon, right? And I said, well, that's what I would have thought, except this fantastic speed that it took off with. I've never seen anything like it. From a standstill, making no sound, just like that, and it was gone. So I said, I don't know what the heck it was. I'm not saying it was Little Green Men. I honestly don't know what it was. It very well could have been some DARPA thing. I mean, we don't have any military bases in the area, but who knows? I don't know.
Did you ever have any look through, or not even look through, but did things that were happening at DARPA ever come up in any of the work you did?
Yeah, only peripherally. There was a point at the end of the first Gulf War where I had to get a Q clearance, which is a nuclear clearance. They're very tightly held. You get a Q clearance, and it's only good for like a week or 2 weeks, and it's only because you absolutely positively need to have this classified nuclear information. So I got this Q clearance, and they sent me out to Vandenberg Air Force Base in Lompoc, California, and so I was able to participate in this meeting seminar kind of thing about advanced weaponry. And it was because I had covered the Iraqi experimental weapons program and the guy who was in charge of it. So there were some DARPA people there. They weren't very open with what they were doing. They spoke in generalities, even though everybody was cleared and we were all cleared for Q. But I remember that was the first time I had ever heard of DARPA. I had been at the agency for 1.5 years.
You never heard of it before?
Nah, never. I had never heard of it. And I went back, and there was another guy in my branch who had a Q clearance. He's now like one of the top 6 people in the CIA. And I said, have you ever heard of this DARPA? And he's like, oh yeah, DARPA. They're working 20 years in advance. Yeah, they're way ahead of anything that you and I can even think of right now.
I've heard 30 to 50 from people before.
That wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. And it's funny too, they've got these little nondescript buildings all over the Washington area. There are no signs or anything. Like there's no sign that says DARPA headquarters right there everywhere. There's in Roslyn, the Roslyn neighborhood of Arlington, Virginia, near my house, there's a kind of an ugly 60s office building. And it's across the street from a burrito place and a Starbucks. And there's a little historical marker in front of it. And it says in the historical marker that this was the headquarters of DARPA. It says what DARPA was in the 1970s. And it was in this building that the internet was invented. Yeah. In the 70s.
Yeah, maybe earlier. They're just telling you the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, because,
Well, the first internet-like thing that they came up with was like 58. It was early.
What happened there?
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
It was just the very first programs where they thought, yeah, maybe this computer can talk to that computer. Let's try to figure that out. But it wasn't ready for any kind of implementation until the 70s. And then it went public, 88, 89?
Yeah, if that.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I just wonder about the shit that they got there. And like, yeah, I think a lot of the UFO stuff is related to
DARPA.
that, and it's protecting that. And I understand that. And I always
do
say,
too.
I hope we're the only ones who are 30 to 50 years ahead.
I hope.
Maybe we're in a situation where China's, so far behind in the race that they actually think they're winning, and that's the goal here. If so, touche. They're doing a nice job with the disinfo. But it's hard to judge it all in here because I'm a podcaster in a studio in Jersey.
Right.
Like I'm not sitting in these back
Right.
rooms. You got to do your best to just sit across from the guys and wonder what's bullshit and what's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
With pretty much anyone, but when it gets to the weird shit like that,
Yeah.
But to go back to Ukraine, one of the things that, like, I remember when this war broke out, I did some content with my friend David Satter, that was episode 92, and then I had him in again for episode 133, and he was effectively the preeminent biographer and psychologist in the Western world on Vladimir Putin. He was assigned the bureau chief in Moscow for the Financial Times in 1976.
Wow.
He was kicked out of the Soviet Union towards the end of the 80s, still reported on Russia. They had, after it flipped over to Russia, he was like the last one to be let back in. And then I'm sure this has changed now. I don't know for a fact, but I'm sure this has changed now since the war broke out. But prior to the war breaking out, he is the only Western journalist who was ever kicked out of Russia. Wow. So Putin kicked him out in December 2013. He was in Ukraine, headed back into Russia where he lived most of the time. And the FSB said, there's like a famous phrase, I forget what it is. And they're like, you can't come back in. Wow. Putin said no. So, it was because he reported on the bombings of the apartment buildings in 1999. It was him, and then the other guy who got whacked in Britain. What the hell was his name? Litvinenko. He was the FSB insider guy.
Right.
They were the only two, and he was the only one in the Western world reporting on this. So I say all this because, the thing that gets lost in all the unfortunate stuff around Ukraine and like the corruption is that, like, I've always been on Team Putin's not a good guy, and the shit he does is crazy. This is a guy who's held on to power for now 26 years. He's rewritten the Constitution a few times to do it. He kills anyone that's a problem. He created an oligopoly that's effectively like a different type of Soviet republic afterwards. And, he kills journalists. He kicks out voices that he doesn't like, and he killed his own people to stay in power. And David's reporting on that is incredible. I highly recommend people go check it out. So when David talks about this war, like, he's so Team Ukraine, and I get it because he's lived in the middle of it. This guy has killed his friends.
Yes.
But, like, there still has to be the balance here between, yes, Putin's a bad guy. Yes, Putin does all this bad shit. Yes, NATO's right to push back against that. But maybe NATO takes it too far that it causes a bad guy to be like, do bad guy shit. You know what I mean?
That's
that
my
fair?
position. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's very fair. That's my position. I agree. Putin's a bad guy. Always has been. I wouldn't trust any former intelligence officer with running a country, in any country. I wouldn't want the CIA director to be my president. Not a chance. But the United States does sometimes push too hard. I saw Richard Blumenthal this morning, Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, complaining on CNN that Russia has invaded Ukraine, Russia has invaded Georgia, Russia has invaded Afghanistan. And I was like, buddy, don't you read the New York Times? What about Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya? What do you think we do all the time? Yeah. I agree he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
But sometimes we do bad shit that push him to do bad things.
But in our defense on those, is the objective supposed to be that we then own the land and call it USA? Versus this is literally on his border and he wants to take Ukraine and make it a part of Russia. That is a difference, no?
Yeah, sure, there's a difference. But if we put it into perspective, if the Canadians occupied something that we genuinely believed was ours, and its residents said, "Oh my God, we wish we were Americans."
It gets interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does get interesting. It's one of those things. It's like there's not really a great solution, but I hope it is more towards like what Trump's saying, which is like, let's get this the fuck
Just
over
get
with.
it over with. It's costing us a fortune, and 1 million people have died already. Let's be done with it. You know, I mentioned to you in the last podcast that we did, that at the CIA we used to criticize the George W. Bush administration. We used to criticize the Bush State Department specifically, because we would say that we had never seen a State Department work so hard to not talk to people, right? Diplomacy was forbidden. We're not going to talk to the Iraqis. We're not going to talk to the Syrians. We're not going to talk to the Libyans. We're not going to talk to the Afghans. Well, who are we going to talk to? Right? I mean, isn't it your job to be talking to these people to try to defuse powder keg situations? Joe Biden was exactly the same way. We don't talk to the Russians. We don't talk to the Chinese. We don't talk to the Iranians. We don't talk to the Cubans.
You're showing your hand when you do that, right?
I suppose. I'm an equal opportunity hater, people say.
Yeah.
But if we're serious about peace, then we need to have a robust and healthy State Department that's engaging our adversaries in diplomacy. You know, I was on this Iranian news show a couple days ago.
Damn it, John. You're hitting all the ones that are giving you a bad name.
I talk to everybody because I hope I can help to explain some things and talk sense to people. And I said the same thing. But I told them, listen, you guys are just as bad. You don't want to talk to us. And so we end up having confrontations in the Persian Gulf. We have confrontations at the United Nations. We have confrontations in Lebanon or in Yemen. We have certainly military confrontations in Iraq because we won't talk to each other. That's what we should be doing, talking to each other.
Do you think talking to each other would stop them, though, from... Because, like, this is one place I'm going to see it from Israel for sure. Like, they do fund Hezbollah.
Sure they do.
Fund Hamas.
They're open about it, yes.
Right? Like, do you think that would stop if we talk with them?
No, I don't. But maybe talking could lead to real dialogue, which then could lead to something that we could negotiate.
Perhaps like a talking with Kim Jong-un kind of thing?
Yeah.
Where you just keep his hand off the button?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Iran... Do you think we're trying to overthrow the Iranian regime right now?
I do.
Actively?
Yes.
You think we got people in there?
No, but the Israelis sure do.
Well, I know that. They probably got the third ranking fucking person in the government.
They probably do.
Yeah.
The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman just 2 or 3 days ago offered to mediate between the White House and the Iranians, which is great because President Pezeshkian has said publicly that he's willing to talk to the Americans, but Khamenei has said he is not, and he's the supreme leader.
Yeah.
So presidents come and go in Iran, just like they come and go in the United States. It all depends on what the supreme leader says.
Why is MBS offering that though? When Saudi and Iran have been engaged in literally like a hot war in Yemen?
Oh, and elsewhere.
And elsewhere.
You know, this is a very MBS thing to do. Nobody hated the Iranians as much as the Saudis.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the Bahrainis too, but the Bahrain's pretty much a vassal state of Saudi Arabia.
I love when you say Bahrain.
Bahrain. Al-Bahrain means the land of the two seas.
Uh-huh.
So the Saudis and the Iranians hate each other. And the Saudis were reasonably petrified of the Iranians. The population of Iran would dwarf the population of Saudi Arabia. The Iranian military is always a threat, even if it's old, even if it lacks spare parts. Just the sheer number of people in the Iranian military. And the Iranians have a pretty decent navy. So the Saudis have been petrified of Iran. This goes back decades. And MBS, when he became crown prince, for better, for worse, said, you know, why don't we just make peace with the Iranians? And then we won't have to worry about them. And that's what he's done. And now they've exchanged ambassadors, and Pezeshkian went to Riyadh, and MBS is going to go to Tehran, and now they have cultural exchanges, and you can travel freely back and forth between the two countries, and they're not worried about the Iranians anymore.
Like at all, though?
They'll always be a little bit reserved, and this is why the Saudis have long sought nuclear technology. Since the 80s, they've been seeking nuclear technology just in case they need to protect themselves against a nuclear Iran. But now they're in a position where their relations with the Iranians are good enough that they can offer up mediation with the United States.
I can't believe the Saudis don't have nukes, all that money.
I would not be surprised if the Saudis had nukes.
Right?
They don't necessarily have a delivery system, but I would not be surprised if they had nukes. We know that they've been seeking nukes since the 80s. We know that they've spoken to the Pakistanis about it, and the Pakistanis are joined at the hip with the Saudis, to the point where the Saudis have been so generous with the Pakistanis that they named the city of Faisalabad after King Faisal because he gave them so much money. They love, love, love the Saudis in Pakistan. And the Saudis see them as, you pat them on the head and tell them to clean the kitchen.
Good boy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, it's been worse between them, certainly.
I read a book last year, and I forget the name of it right now, on Mohammed bin Salman, but it was really good. I want to shout those. Can we Google books on MBS? I'll be able to see the cover and know it, Alessi. But about like his rise and the shit he does. And like I've long been very familiar with the Khashoggi story.
Oh, sure.
And what he did there. I mean, he's not a good guy.
No, he's not. He's murderous.
Yeah, but we seem to be somewhat cool with him.
Now we are, yeah.
Why?
Joe Biden made a couple of major errors in relations with the Saudis. MBS had ordered the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi. And they didn't just assassinate him. They did it in the most brutal freaking fashion.
While he probably watched on the screen.
Mm-hmm. I think he probably did.
Yeah.
But there were people in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul who could hear him screaming as they were chopping him up. And then they never found the body. They think that the Saudi intelligence service probably put the pieces of his body in separate bags and threw them in the trash or threw them down wells in Istanbul.
Well, they have video of them carrying bags out too, and it could have been pieces of it.
I think it probably was.
Yeah.
So Joe Biden said he's a murderer. He's no good. Any insult you could think of during the campaign in 2020, Biden lobbed it at MBS. And then he won. And then oil prices went up. And then he had to go hat in hand. And I went to Saudi Arabia for Biden's meeting with MBS. I went to cover it. I was working for Sputnik at the time. So I went to cover it. And I got in the meeting and everything. And I'll tell you, one of the things I reported, I'm very proud of this. So they're in the Royal Majlis, right? This gigantic room where everybody's sitting in a semicircle. And those of us in the media are standing against the back wall here. So the king's in the middle next to Biden. And then it's like the foreign minister, the ambassador, the deputy foreign minister, this guy, that guy, hangers on. And MBS is all the way over here on the side. And I noticed that the king has an iPad on his lap. It's discreet, but he's got this iPad and he keeps looking down at the iPad. And I thought, that's kind of funny. What the heck could he be looking at on an iPad while he's talking to the president? And then I happen to look over at MBS and he's got an iPad. And he's typing his father messages. Yeah. And then his father would look down, because his father's demented. Mm-hmm. He would look down and just read what MBS told him to say. It was MBS that was running the meeting.
Are you like looking around like, is anyone else seeing this?
I know, right? So I reported it that night. Like, I can't be the first person that's ever seen this. And then a buddy of mine at the agency called me because he had seen the report. And he said, "You saw the iPad, huh?" And I said, "I did." "How long's been that? Has that been going on?" He said, "Since the beginning." Yeah. I don't even think the king realizes he's the king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd believe that. I mean, the whole thing about what he did with the Ritz-Carlton hotel.
Right.
And
my ex-wife was in the Ritz-Carlton then. She happened to be there during the coup.
Your CIA ex-wife.
Yeah. Well, no, she's former CIA. She's with some defense contractor.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah, well, take that for what it's worth. But
you're not allowed to talk about her.
I'm not allowed to talk about her.
Okay.
So she happened to be in the hotel when the coup took place, and they moved everybody to the Four Seasons. Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody.
And that was, he basically went after, because it's
They
an
made it a prison.
extensive royal family. He
Yeah.
made it.
He arrested all of his cousins who could possibly pose a threat to him, beginning with Mohammed bin Nayef. Now,
Yes.
this was important because Mohammed bin Nayef was the golden boy of the Saudi royal family.
Why was he the golden
A
boy?
genuinely good guy. Smart, educated at I think it was Georgetown. I can't recall now. I think he went to Georgetown. But anyway, he was the head of the Saudi intelligence service. And nobody worked as closely with the American government as Mohammed bin Nayef. He was the son of Prince Nayef. Nayef, for decades, was the Minister of Interior, and then he became the Crown Prince. Did Nayef become king? No. Nayef died before he could become king, to the
I
best of my...
think that's right. I'm trying to remember
Is that
it.
right?
Because it went through.
Yeah, he died as Crown Prince.
This guy is alive.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, Mohammed bin Nayef's alive. He's in jail. But,
He's still in jail.
yeah. But his father was, I forget what. He was,
Yeah.
yeah, put Nayef bin Abdulaziz. There he is.
Yeah. Until his death in June 2012.
Yeah, he was the Crown Prince. He died as Crown Prince.
Yeah.
And so when he died, Salman became king.
Well,
See-
Crown Prince. Or no,
but-
Salman the father became king. Right.
Became
yes,
king.
Yes.
Right. So the Saudis had this really fucked up kind of succession. So the founder of the country was King Abdulaziz. They called him Ibn Saud, the father of Saudi Arabia.
It's Blood and Oil, by the way. Alessi, that was the name of the book. I just want to give those guys a shout out as two authors.
Cool.
Yeah, that one right there. Bradley Hope and Justin Schneck. Great book.
Excellent.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
So there was no succession plan when the old man died, but he had like 115 sons. So King Saud was his eldest son. King Saud became king, but he had mental problems.
Mm.
And so he was overthrown by his brothers and exiled to Egypt. And then Faisal became king. And then Faisal was assassinated by a deranged cousin. And so Khalid became king. And then after Khalid died, Fahd became king. After Fahd, then came Abdullah. After Abdullah came Sultan died before he became king. And then Nayef died. Anyway, and then Salman became king. So for years, Saudi watchers were saying, well, they're going to run out of brothers sooner or later, right? You can't just keep doing this brother to brother. It's got to be father to son at some point. So that point came when Mohammed bin Nayef was named crown prince.
Mm.
People were like, okay, it's the next generation now is going to take power. Mohammed bin Nayef is the best possible choice. In the West, we love him. He's smart. He's shrewd. He was the head of the Saudi intelligence service. And
he went to Georgetown.
I'm pretty sure it was
My
Georgetown.
conspiracy brains are tingling. Go ahead.
He had a weekly majlis. Do you know what a majlis is? They call it a diwaniyah in Kuwait, but all the other Arab countries call it a majlis, where you have sort of an open house. Let's call it an open house.
Okay.
So if let's say I'm a young Saudi guy, and I'm going to get married. I don't really have very much money because I'm not a royal family member. So I go to the majlis and I say, Your Highness, you kiss him on the hand and on the shoulder to show your fealty. Your Highness, I'm getting married. I'm a member of this family. I'm a member of this tribe. I'm getting married. I don't have any money. Will you please buy my living room furniture? And he'll say, yes, of course. Mohammed, talk to this guy and get him living room furniture. The next guy comes up. Oh, Your Highness, thank you for seeing me. My car broke down and I'm a taxi driver and I need a new car. Abdullah, give this guy a new car. That's a majlis in Saudi Arabia.
I got to go to one of those. Shit.
Well, there's a guy waiting patiently in line. Unbeknownst to Mohammed bin Nayef or anybody else, he had a bomb stuffed up his ass. Literally, he stuffed the whole bomb up his ass. And when he gets to the front of the line, he detonates it.
Oh my God.
He blows himself to 1,000 pieces, but he almost kills Mohammed bin Nayef.
Oh, he shoved it up his ass and didn't even get to kill the guy? Tough way to go.
He should have grabbed onto him.
Yeah.
You know, like they did with Gandhi. But anyway, that's a whole different thing.
John's like, good kill. Good kill.
Yeah, good clean kill. So it made him a hero in Saudi Arabia. The guy was Al-Qaeda. He had come from Yemen. They had been planning this for months. The bomb was specifically designed to go up the guy's ass. It was incredible, what craftsmanship. And it was, oh my God, they can't believe he survived. So the Saudi people are like, oh my God. And then he gets named Crown Prince. They said, oh, he's going to be the greatest. Everybody loves him. He's a national hero. The CIA invites him to the headquarters to give him the highest medal anybody can get because he survived this attack from Al-Qaeda. And then he goes back and he becomes Crown Prince. And then he gets overthrown by Mohammed bin Salman. And not just overthrown, but placed under arrest.
Yeah.
And then there were several other cousins that were like, hey, wait a minute, Mohammed bin Salman, you can't do this. We're with Mohammed bin Nayef. Well, one of them dies in an airplane crash a couple days later. The other one dies in a mysterious one-car accident on the Riyadh to Jeddah highway. And now there's nobody that can challenge MBS.
How did a guy that young, with that many other players who could be lined up against him, including a dude who's like in charge of the intelligence service, successfully get everyone on his side?
Through fear is really what it came down to. When it became clear in those early days that he was willing to kill his own cousins just because they might someday pose a challenge to him, everybody backed off. There's a famous prince, Al-Walid bin Talal, famous at least in the United States because he owns a quarter of Citibank and he owns, half of Berkshire Hathaway, and guy's a billionaire more than most people can count. He happened to be in Riyadh when the coup took place, and he was close to Mohammed bin Nayef. And so they grabbed him too. And they said, you could be executed as a Western spy. You can be executed as a supporter of Mohammed bin Nayef, or you can give us half of your money.
And he gave him half their money?
You bet he did. And then he ran back to the United States as quickly as he could.
It's like the Hunger Games over there.
That's exactly what it's like.
It's fucking crazy. And yet they have so much economic power.
See, nobody expected there to be this kind of a psychopath in the Saudi line of succession.
Why not?
Well, because the Saudis historically have been very, very consultative. They were famous for this, where it's actually written down in a family agreement where and they have a name for it, and the name escapes me now. The something council, I forget now, where the 25 or 30 senior most princes, the king dies, and then all the senior most princes get together, and they say, okay, well, the next brother becomes king, so who's going to become crown prince? Because they have skipped brothers. Some brothers have said, this isn't for me. I'd rather live in Paris, or London. I don't want to be the crown prince. And they say, fine, they just skip them over. So they consult on all these major personnel decisions until MBS. MBS said, no, I'm the crown prince. And whoever doesn't like it is going to get a bullet between the eyes. And then he actually did it.
Yeah. He grew up like they never suspected he was going to be that kid because he was like the spoiled rich kid who played video games all the time. But what these guys were saying in their book is that when he was a teenager, he had access to his father, so he would start to just sit in on meetings and watch. And he learned how power was wielded. Yeah. And actually picked up on those things. And the leap that I made with this is that perhaps because he played a lot of video games, like they were saying, like a lot. And perhaps because he went into these fake worlds and he didn't have any stakes in his life because he has everything he ever wants. There were some other weird psychological things going on with him, like with punishments and stuff like that. Like he would act weird. But like I think he got desensitized to the world, my guess, through the video games and kind of living within that, and then saw the application of power in the real world and kind of meshed the two, and he doesn't feel anything. He has absolutely zero empathy. He's a total sociopath.
That's exactly what it is. Sociopathy. I was invited to a dinner once in Riyadh. I was serving there in 91. And there was this guy that I was friendly with at the foreign ministry. He was just a fun, nice guy, you know, guy that you had a good time hanging out with. He invited me to his house for dinner, which was unusual for a Saudi because I got to meet his wife. She was unveiled. And that was a very big deal. It really showed friendship. So we're invited to this dinner, and it's at one of the palaces. I don't even remember.
Was she hot?
No. No. No.
I love how you said that. No.
Poor guy. They were probably first cousins, too, in retrospect. Anyway, Fahad was the king. He was not at the dinner, but there were a lot of princes at the dinner. And he and I went out onto the balcony. He wanted to smoke a cigarette. We're out there laughing and joking. And then this big, fat barrel of lard comes out onto the balcony, and he snaps to attention. My friend does. And I recognize this kid as Azuz. He was Prince Abdulaziz bin Fahad, the favorite son of King Fahad. I had never seen Azuz before. I'd seen pictures of him. He had to be 450 pounds. It was disgusting.
Whoa.
Remind me to come back to that in a second. So one of the things about Saudi culture is it's considered to be effeminate to wear jewelry. Men don't wear jewelry. The only thing you're allowed to wear is a wedding ring. That's it. So in order to show wealth or good taste, all Saudi men have a really good watch and a really good pen. So this guy had like $1,000 Waterman, whatever special pen that he got in Geneva or whatever. And Azuz comes out and he snaps to attention and he says, "Your Majesty." And I said, "Hello, Prince." I didn't call him Azuz. That was his nickname. I said, "Hello, Prince Abdulaziz. I'm John Kiriakou from the American Embassy." Didn't shake my hand. Didn't even make eye contact with me. And Azuz says, "I like your pen." And my friend says, "Oh, thank you." And he takes it out, and looks at it. And Azuz says, "I'll take it now." And then just takes it, puts it in his own pocket, and then goes back into the dinner. And my friend is looking at me, and I said, "What a fucking asshole that guy is."
You didn't say that too loud, did you?
Not too loud.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And he just shook his head. I thought he was going to cry. But that's how these guys are.
Yeah.
They're used to shitting on people.
Yep.
And you have to just take it.
You said you wanted to come back to the fact it was 450?
Azuz was so freaking fat. They were all fat like this. It was ridiculous. So when they renovated Dahran Airport, I was stationed in Bahrain at the time. This was 94, so it was 3 years later. When they renovated Dahran Airport, they had to special order double-wide escalators because when these Saudi royal family members would get on the escalators, they would have to stand sideways because their asses couldn't fit on the escalator. So they're all double wides.
It's
pretty sorry.
It's sorry, and it's just I would recommend people read that book just because.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's a wide. It's crazy.
If you want the sort of deeper background of the royal family as a family, beginning with the fight to consolidate the Arabian Peninsula, The House of Saud is an absolute classic. It was written in the 80s. Yeah. Absolute classic.
Okay.
It was the first book I read before my first trip to Saudi Arabia.
When was your first trip there? 91?
90.
90. You were, and that was when you were the Saddam Hussein historian for CIA, right? Were you going there on something related to that?
Yeah, the Kuwaiti royal family had been pushed out of Kuwait from the invasion, and they were relocated to Taif, right outside of Mecca.
Right.
So I went to
Okay. It's coming back to me now.
babysit.
Well, John, one last thing before we get out of here today. One topic we can't leave hanging out there is China, because it's this one's like kind of a weird one because it was like one of those things you couldn't talk about like 4 years ago or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like, don't talk about China. And then I'll never forget this. I've told this story a few times, but I was talking with Danny Jones. This is like June 2022. So the Ukraine war, it was 3 months, 4 months
just
in.
gotten started.
And I said, I saw something crazy today. One of the kind of old school general think tanks in DC posted a scathing paper on China. I was like, huh. And this was also at a time where there were some podcasts that were happening on our shows where some guys were starting to talk about China who had some connections, and they were doing it pretty loudly and proudly. And I'm like, I think this is going to shift. And I'm telling you, overnight, like it had probably already started, it suddenly became like YouTube wanted that content.
Wow.
You know, the platforms wanted that, and they were pushing the shit out of it.
Wow,
Now,
really?
I look at China and I see they got a huge GDP. They got a huge population. They got a crazy government. They got a strong military. And they're buying a lot of soft power around, I might even call it hard power, around the world. And these are all problematic. But sometimes I do hearken back to is this just like we're trying to overplay an enemy so that we have one, so we have something to focus on? Or do you think that they're the full-blown, legit, like, threat to American sovereignty through things like BRICS and stuff like that?
I think maybe it's somewhere in the middle. I hate to be wishy-washy about it.
I like that.
But the reason I say that is because if you look historically, Tibet aside, the Chinese have never invaded another country anywhere in the world. They had a border skirmish with the Indians. They had a border skirmish with the Vietnamese that lasted a couple of days. With the Indians, it was longer, a couple of weeks. But Tibet aside, I say Tibet aside because the Chinese genuinely believe Tibet is Chinese, right? It's not an independent, shouldn't be an independent country. So they took it in the 50s, I think it was 53, and they kept it. But the Chinese just don't interfere militarily in other countries. They do have a very small base that ironically they share with us in Djibouti. And there's like a fence down the middle, and this side is American and that side is Chinese. It's the weirdest, craziest thing.
That's got to be awkward.
The Chinese have all their hangar doors open and ours are closed. And I said to one of the guys, I said, hey, how come ours are closed? What's in there? And he's like, dude, I can't tell you what's in there. I said, I know what's in there. I'm just pulling your leg. Anyway, I don't think we need to worry about the Chinese militarily. Not the way you hear, senators and congressmen talking about it.
Why not?
Because they just don't have an imperialist past. Okay. Yeah. Now, what we do have to worry about very much is they are masters at the use of soft power.
Yes.
Masters.
Belt and Road Initiative.
Oh my God, it's absolutely brilliant. And talk about a country with a long-term view.
Yes.
Oh my God. They look decades and decades out. I'm a dual US Greek citizen, right? I take my Greekness and my Greek citizenship very seriously. So I'm in Greece, and the Greeks are having these economic problems, and people are like, fucking Chinese came and bought the port of Piraeus, the port of Thessaloniki, and the port of Irakli on Crete.
That's what all my friends say too.
Yeah.
All my Greek friends, yeah.
They just come in and buy everything.
Yes.
Oh, we don't want you guys to lose your jobs. We know you're broke. We'll buy it. You just keep working the way you work. Well, now everybody's indebted to the Chinese.
Yeah.
Look, every highway that's been built in Africa in the last 10 years has been built by the Chinese.
Yes.
Same thing in Yemen. I remember the first time I was in Yemen. 1991, the Chinese were building highways there. It's like thousands of Chinese, and they're all doing road construction. But they were using dynamite to dynamite through some rock to build this road. And the tribe, that they still had nomadic tribes there. They were furious at all this noise. And so one day, this Chinese, I don't know what he was, a corporate leader, the ambassador, somebody, some senior Chinese guy came in a helicopter. And they're doing a ceremony and dedicating cutting the ribbon and dedicating the highway. And here the tribe had tied ropes to the helicopter, and they tied the ropes to like a dozen camels, and they're dragging the helicopter into the desert to punish the Chinese for making all that noise building the road.
Whoa.
There's even a monument on one of the hills overlooking Sana'a. It's a monument to the Chinese road workers who were killed by tribesmen while they were building the roads. The Yemenis had it up to here with the Chinese.
Sounds like it.
But then the Africans were like, hey, you're welcome to come here. We're happy to take your money. And that works.
They can't pay it back.
No, and the Chinese don't expect it back. But instead, if you can't pay it back, how
here.
about, you let us stay. Or you let us process all of your rare earth metals. Because most of the rare earth metals that are mined are not processed on site. There's so much waste involved that you can't make money. But the Chinese have so much money that they're happy to take the loss on the ore processing because it sort of buys them an in with the countries that mine it. You know, you go to Congo, for example, or whatever they're calling it now. I guess it's Congo. And the biggest embassy in the country is the Chinese embassy. It's not the American embassy or the Russians. Used to be, but it's the Chinese.
Yeah, Africa is like ground zero with this.
It is.
It's everywhere. When you talk with Sean Ryan, I want you to talk with this about him. Okay. Or talk about this with him.
Will do.
Because I know like he feels really strongly about this stuff. A couple years ago when he was on my podcast, we talked about it a bunch. He's like, John is here. John is there. John is everywhere.
They are. They are.
And it's hard to deny that.
And it's like it happened without anybody noticing. Mm-hmm. And then by the time the international community noticed, it's too late. They're everywhere. And how do we roll that back? We don't know.
Well, we also like accept the fact that they won't integrate our tech companies in there, but they integrate all theirs here. It's like this double standard.
It is a double standard.
And then there's even soft power with like the weapons of the mind. Like, you know, this is the one place where like the communism works. It makes me sick to say that, but like with their kids, on their TikTok, it fucking shuts off at 9 o'clock at night. First of all, and secondly, they're getting science videos. And they're getting like good videos. Here, it's 24/7, and kids are getting titty videos.
Yes.
And brain melting videos.
Oh my God.
So they're using our freedom and democracy against itself. And in this one anecdotal example, they're using their lack of freedom for themselves in a long-term investment. Stuff like this bothers me.
And your earlier point about fentanyl should not be understated. That's not an accident.
I'm going to have this guy Ben Westhoff in here. He did an amazing podcast like probably 6 years ago with Joe Rogan. He wrote this book called Fentanyl Inc.
Oof.
You ever see this?
No.
Guy was like a culture reporter, not a reporter on any of this stuff. He was assigned some story like in the music industry to cover. And while he's talking to some source in the story, the guy offhand mentions fentanyl and like what a problem it is. And Ben had heard of it, but he's like, tell me more about it. And very quickly he realized, holy shit. And he went down the rabbit hole. And he's a savage. This guy, Ben, bought a ticket to China, like he's an author himself, and said, let's just see how easy it is to get fentanyl.
Wow.
And he like, I'm going to let him tell the full story when he comes in here, but he goes to like this full warehouse and everything. And they're like, so you want it in that package or you want it in this package?
Oh my God.
And then you see that these guys are also working directly with the cartels who can just truck it across the border. It's a reverse opium war.
Oh my God.
And that's a big problem.
Yeah, that's a big problem. Mm-hmm.
You think they're going to clean that up?
I'll tell you, I think if anybody does, it's going to be Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people, I think, didn't understand the full import of declaring the Mexican cartels to be terrorist groups. That opens up a whole bunch of presidential authorities and lines of funding that otherwise would have been unavailable to the military to go after the fentanyl trade.
Can you explain that, like how that would work? Because I have some guys coming in. I was going to ask them about it. I still will, but
sure. You know, if an organization is declared to be a clear and present danger to American persons, American installations, or the American government, the president can order programs to be implemented to oppose them without necessitating congressional approval. You can act quickly, like Trump. Send the military. Well, he can send the military without having to get a congressional authorization because the cartels are now a terrorist group. So it opens that avenue. You don't have to get it bogged down in some debate on Capitol Hill where they attach the perverted arts funding, amendment, and you need 60 votes in the Senate to break cloture. You just do it.
You got power.
Yeah, you got power. Just do it. And nobody really talked about that, which kind of surprised me, especially the DC-based press, like Politico and The Hill and even The Post. They're usually right on these kinds of issues. But
and they weren't on this.
No, one. I think it was a good. They were like, "Oh my God, what's President Sheinbaum going to say? She's new and she's never had to deal with Trump before. And oh my God, they're not going to like us anymore in Mexico." It's like,
I
that
mean,
wasn't the point.
Yeah, that ship sailed.
Yeah, that was not the point. Also, did you happen to notice that border crossings have gone down to almost zero?
Yeah, I gotta get more information on it, but the early reports are that it's a lot better than it was.
Yeah.
Pretty easy to be a lot better than it was, to be honest. But
the Democrats just could not get it through their thick skulls that the American people wanted the border secure.
Yeah, and it's like the most common sense thing. It's not hateful or anything.
I'll tell you, when I was in Greece 2 years ago, they were having a serious problem with the Turks. The Turks take billions of euros from the European Union to house refugees. Okay, they have refugees coming from Syria, from Iraq, from Kurdistan, from all over the place, Pakistan, Afghanistan, thousands and thousands of people. So the EU gives them billions of euros, just keep them in Turkey. But what they do is at night, they push them across the border into Greece. Yeah. In fact, I was with my cousin. Oh my God, my cousin's a DJ on the island of Rhodes.
By the way, I've heard direct stories from my guys in the Greek military about that.
It's bad.
Yeah.
It's really bad. So my cousin, he finishes his gig at this nightclub, and he and I are standing outside. The nightclub just closed. It's like 2:30 in the morning. We're standing outside, and it's right on the beach, and this boat comes up. It softly just kind of lands on the beach, and like 12 Syrians get out, and we're looking at these guys, and I said to one of them, "Antum min wain? Where are you from?" "Min Syria. We're from Syria." I go, "Are you refugees?" And they said, "Yeah." And my cousin, he's a young guy. He just turned 30. He's like, "Are you hungry?" And they said, "Yes." And he said, "Wait here, I'll get you food." And I'm like, "What?" He goes in the club. He comes out with these sandwiches.
John's coming out with a stick.
I know. I'm like, hey, back to Turkey with all of you. Under el maracas. So we told them, we had to call the police because the police would have to process them as refugees. And so the cops came down, were very nice, very welcoming, and everything was cool. Because they said it's not the Syrians' fault.
No, it's not.
They're looking for a better life. It's the fucking Turks' fault.
Yep.
Because the Turks are taking the money and still pushing the refugees out. So the point of this is what the Greeks did. They don't have much of a land border with Turkey. It's all in the north. Mm-hmm. Everything is islands. The islands are hard to patrol because there are 1,100 islands. Yeah. So what they did is they built a wall, like an actual honest-to-God wall. And the Turks jumped up and down.
Like across the water?
No, on the land part of the border in northern Greece. Not a single person crosses that wall. Not a single one. And here's me, like, Trump, he's lying. The Mexicans are going to pay for it. And then the Greek wall, the wall works. I said, ooh, I was wrong. I was wrong about the wall.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Listen, I got to give him credit on that. He talked about it so simply, which I think was a turnoff. But when you run the tape in 2015 of what he was saying.
He was right.
He was right on that for sure.
Yes, he was.
And more importantly, a lot of other people were very wrong.
That's right.
And shit got crazy. But, John, we could be here all night if we keep going across stuff. I think we just did 2 again this time.
Okay.
So, this was fucking great.
This was great.
Love having you through. Glad to see you're getting some speakers gigs.
Thank you very much.
So, we'll stick any links, including to your Substack, down below.
Substack and Unified. I do most of my stuff in those 2 places. And listen, if you're in the UK over the next 2 months, I got 44 speaking dates. It's going to be at tigerslanestudios.com. All the info's there.
We'll have that down below. Make mark for those 3 links, Alessa, and we'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you as always, sir.
Thank you, buddy.
All right.
It's great.
Everybody else, you know what it is. Give it a thought. Get back to me. Peace. Thank you guys for watching the episode. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and smash that like button on the video. They're both a huge, huge help. And if you would like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below.